Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first penultimate meeting for this session of Council's term. And as such, we are going today on the Council webpage. We're not going live on Facebook. So again, welcome, and I'll ask Councillor Ripper to do acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and to pay respect to elders both past and present. And I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present that are with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. I'll do the civic prayer. Almighty God, from whom comes every good and perfect gift, we give you thanks for the blessings you bestow upon us in this Shire. Grant to those who hold office in this council the spirit of justice and truth, wisdom and charity, that mindful of our responsibility, we may promote the welfare of your people and advance the common good. Amen. We don't have any apologies. So we have the adoption of the previous minutes held on the 9th of December 2020. Somebody like to move those adoption? Councillor Andrews and Councillor Whipper. Is there any discussion in relation to the correctness of the minutes? Then Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett, you're on mute.
Sorry, just had the wrong screen. Mr. Mayor, in those minutes, you spoke about the performance improvement order that had been initially reported back to the Minister. Could you confirm that what the training was that you undertook as Mayor in terms of running meetings?
We are discussing the correctness of the minutes, Councillor Scandrett.
Well, it's business arising, if you wish, Mr. Mayor.
No business arising under the new Code of Meeting Practice as we endorsed and was put upon us by the Office of Local Government.
Well, it's a qualification because you didn't address that you took that training in that report to the Minister.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. And anybody else on the correctness of the minutes? Then I put that. All in favour, please say aye or raise your card. Thank you. Carry. Thank you. Carry.
Mr. Mayor, your one was back to front.
There should
You need to turn it around the right way.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turner, for pointing that out. Adoption, declarations of interest. Does any council have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. And we turn to the business paper and the mayoral minute in relation to the 7.1 page 2, the mayoral minute in relation to the Australia Day Awards. And just note the local recipients of the Australia Day Honours List. Ms. Julie Gillick, OAM, Dr. Judith Lynch, OAM, Mr. J. Allen, OAM, and that congratulations to our Senior Citizen of the Year, Mrs. Catherine Constable, and Widgecarriby Shire Young Citizen of the Year, Ms. Charlotte Gillespie, both worthy recipients, and congratulations to those who were nominated and have been successful in their appointments. I'd just like to say that We had the Australia Day activities at the Mossvale Services Club. It went off very well, in my opinion. I think there was about 130 to 140 people present. And just noting that in one way, COVID did us a favour because it was an extremely warm day. And being out of Berrima, as we know, on hot days under the tent or the marquee, it makes it by 11:30 or 11 o'clock quite uncomfortable. So I think it went well. And I think and acknowledge Councillor Larry Whipper and Councillor Scandrett, who were present, and MC by Councillor Andrews, who did a great job. So thank you to those councillors who participated, and we will be reviewing the Australia Day events from here on in, just to revise and review and see whether in the ensuing years, whether a different format can be undertaken. So that is the mayoral minute that I moved. And although it doesn't need a seconder, would somebody like to second that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Any discussion to it? Then I put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carry. Thank you. So we move to page 3, corporate strategy and development services. Oh, sorry, public forum first. Sorry, first stay back, and I get. We have a item on 17.1, question with notice in relation to proposed eco-tourist facility. Ms. Marie Barbaric will address council in support of the application. So are you present there? Yes, she is. Welcome to the first meeting of Wingecarribee Council in 2021. You've been told the conditions, so I will hand the floor over to you.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
you can start.
You're
Oh,
right.
hi. Sorry, guys. I wasn't sure if I was there.
Yes.
So I just like to chat about point 17.1 on the agenda. The owner of that property has met with me numerous times over a period of months to talk about how he can work with Aboriginal community here in the Wingecarribee to better improve anybody's like the Aboriginal impact on his proposed ecotourist facility. We've been talking consistently about what services, what businesses are here, what elders, what language groups, etc. And he's really been trying very hard to understand and work with the Aboriginal community. And we fully support this application because it benefits the Aboriginal community by bringing employment in. People like Wendy Lotter with Platypus Dreaming, the elders through Yamanda, even Culture with some of our work here that we do to develop some of our programs there. We actually think it's a really lovely opportunity for our community to work with him and to highlight some of the stuff that belongs here on the land of the Gundungurra people, and to be able to offer outside people to come and visit and actually get an understanding and a view of this land. My understanding is that there was queries from Larry Whipper in regards to what language would be used. Well, of course, it would be Gundungurra because this is the Gundungurra nation here, and any Aboriginal knowledge. He won't be doing anything. He'll be working in unison with the Aboriginal community. So, you know, we can't understand why is it that there is such an issue. Nobody has spoken from council to any of the Aboriginal community about whether or not we support him in regards to culture and, you know, Aboriginal business, and we do. Has anyone got any questions?
No, thank you. Look, it's because it's public forum, you have the right to speak to council, but under public forum rules of the Code of Meeting Practice, you can't take questions, or I'm not permitted to take questions unless it's a visitor item. So,
Right.
do you have any extra issue you'd like to make comment on?
Well, we're happy to make ourselves available for any meetings in regards to supporting this application, and to answer any questions in regards to any Aboriginal contact or impact on that development.
All
So
right.
we're more than happy to be part of that, any future discussion.
All right, thank you very much, and appreciate your input. Thank you, Mari. We will put you out in the waiting room and take the next speaker on public forum on item 18.1, notice of motion 1/2021 DA 19-1650. Proposed eco-tourist facility, and Mr. David McKinley will address council against the development. Good afternoon, Mr. McKinley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon.
Yes, you have the floor, and your time is starting whenever you wish to start speaking.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do this afternoon is, again, just to run through the concerns of a group of residents that I'm speaking on behalf of. They're concerned primarily about the information that's been provided by the application and the assessment process that's been undertaken by council. There are, from our review of the documentation and the report that's been presented to council, there are a significant number of omissions of data, and I think in terms of the assessment process hasn't properly assessed the overall proposal, which is not just for buildings, but it's to operate an ecotourism facility. And I'll talk a bit more about those issues as we move through. The application really only, from what we can see, has been evaluated based on the overnight guests, and that's the 48. A number of them are camping, and a few of them are in cabins. But really, the proposal, when you read through the documents, goes much beyond just overnight visitors. There's a whole lot of cultural activities, indigenous workshop activities, bush care, and so on, all of which is consistent with an ecotourism facility, but is really sort of suggesting that the visitor numbers are way beyond, and potentially as the facility grows and develops and becomes more popular, will be way beyond the 48. And that's where the concerns of the residents are about how the facility has been sort of evaluated by council. In terms of the information, particularly, there are three areas, and I'll touch on these in detail. One is the traffic study. The baseline data for that traffic study really doesn't address the true sort of traffic movements along the road, and it's interesting that the report developed by the council's own sort of staff member working for the planning consultant doesn't really look at the interests of council in terms of its asset. The dust analysis is very simplistic, and again doesn't look at the real treatment methods that should be applied to a council road. The final bit of information is around the wastewater management. Again, the assumptions that have been put forward and evaluated by Sydney Water really only look at the number of visitors that are staying overnight, the 48. And indeed, when you look at the detail that's been submitted as part of that wastewater management, it's probably, in our assessment, probably 200 to 300% undersized. And one of the interesting things is, in terms of the campus, for example, that they're not allowed to have a shower as part of the estimation of the daily water or wastewater generation. So that's really, a concern to us in terms of the minimum data that's been used to evaluate the proposal. The traffic anomalies come out particularly with the number of movements that have been estimated. The report prepared for the proponent of the application is underestimated significantly the number of traffic movements, and as such, that's really affected the classification of the road. Based on our assessment of the number of movements that you would expect to have for a rural road of this type, the classification would be under the Austroad standard, a U2, and that would be minimum 6.2 metre carriageway and a maximum speed limit of 80 kilometres an hour. The current road falls well below that and probably is only at its widest point 4.5 and probably averaging between 3.5 and 4 metres in the majority of the road. So really the traffic impact, when we start to look at then the actual visitors that may be going to the facility, the types of vehicles that they may be going down in, school buses and so on, this really places a lot of stress on the council's asset. And it's from that sort of perspective that we think that the conditions that have been put into the proposal that's been put forward by council staff for you to recommend are not really adequate. In terms of moving forward, it's important, I think, for council to have a set of conditions that provide council with, protection of their assets. That's important. Protection of the public and the safety on the roads. And also to have conditions that mean that if there's failure to comply, the council have the capacity to enforce properly conditions of compliance. So as a minimum, from a road safety and a traffic management point of view, the road should be at least up to the U2 level, which means that it should be a carriageway width of at least 6.2 metres. And to effectively deal with the dust management side of things, probably should be sealed to ensure that long-term asset protection is actually there for council. That ought to be, as a minimum, the requirement that council put in place. In terms of road safety, the signage on Foxgrove Road should be upgraded, and it's not appropriate for the operator to be suggesting speed limits to staff, to guests and so on attending the facility. Those really become...
Mr. McKinley, I'm afraid your time has expired. Your time has expired, sir, but you have made your point, I think, very, very clear and I think very passionately. So you will be put out in the waiting room and we will move on to a speaker speaking in favour of the development, and that is Mr. Darren Hogan, will address council in support of the development. Are you there, Mr. Hogan? We are connecting with you, Mr. Hogan. Tell us when you speak when you wish, and we'll see if we can hear you. We still not connected.
Yes, I am.
Right. Mr. Hogan, would you be able to pull your computer screen down to you so we can see you? That's better. Thank you. So you know the rules quite fluently, so away you go.
Thank you. I respectfully ask that council resolve to approve the development application.
You're on mute. I'm not sure what's happened.
No, you can continue. Continue.
Continue, Mr. Hogan.
I'm just wondering, I don't know, can you hear me now?
Yes. Can all councillors hear Mr. Hogan? Yes, yeah. Okay.
I'm having problems here in terms of, I think it keeps bouncing back.
Right, well, I don't know whether we can do anything with that, but just continue addressing council. Okay. Away you go, Mr. Hogan.
Okay. I respectfully ask the council resolve to approve the development application at 198 Foxgrove Road, Canyon Lea. Council officers, Water New South Wales and the Rural Fire Service all endorsed the development proposal and recommend that the application be approved. I believe that council has misunderstood this application during the previous council debate. It is unfortunate that Council Whipper chose to quote only part of the comments from council staff in the business paper regarding the requirements for a management plan. Councillors were made to believe that Council's Environment and Sustainability Division had not received all necessary information. This is not correct. Councillor Whipper addressed only the first sentence of their comment, not the entire comment. Council's Department of Environment and Sustainability advises that there is insufficient detail in the management plan with requests to minimising impacts, as Mr. Whipper pointed out. However, the comment continues with the statement, should the additional information be obtained as a condition of consent, then assessment of the information will be provided at that stage and will be more specific in detail and can be required by way of a deferred commencement condition. I have not read the entire comment as time is short, just the relevant parts. I have an email from Council's assessing officer on the 16th of August, which states that only a conceptual management plan is required to be submitted as part of the DA, and that Council will impose a condition for submitting a full management plan before the commencement of the operations. A management plan acts as a tool to ensure that development is carried out in a manner proposed. It is not an assessment document. This is why the council's officer only requested a conceptual plan of management to assess the application. There's no reason for the council to refuse the application on the issues of a management plan. Councillor Whipper has also stated that the application is deficient concerning the flora and fauna report. This comment is simply incorrect and again misleading. A flora and fauna report is an entirely separate document to a management plan and has a different purpose. A flora and fauna report is an essential assessment tool when assessing a development proposal, and council staff have not raised any concern regarding the flora and fauna assessment. Councillor Whipper's comments seem to be related only to the management plan, and I believe he has accidentally used the wrong term in relation to the issue he was raising. On the matter of bushfire management, I confirmed that the Rural Fire Service granted its concurrence to the proposal and approved the bushfire management plan lodged with the application. The Rural Fire Service raised no concern with the proposal. Regarding the legitimacy of an ecotourism proposal, the council officer confirms within their report that the proposal satisfies all 11 requirements that make up an ecotourism development. Do you seriously believe that a council planner would recommend approval to an application if all the requirements were not satisfied? I think not. Ecotourism Australia will not grant certification of a facility until council has granted development approval first. For councillors to suggest that the proposal lacks justification for meeting an ecotourism facility's recognised standards is incorrect. The proposal satisfies the statutory requirements of the LEP and will be endorsed by Ecotourism Australia once council grants development approval. On the matter of Foxgrove Road, some councils raised concerns regarding the previous debate regarding the adequacy of Foxgrove Road. Now, I referred to an email from councillors Mr. Rick Mooney on the 4th of January, which states, I can confirm that council's engineering staff have assessed the road and have determined that it meets council specifications. Foxgrove Road is a rural country road and drivers are expected to drive to the road conditions. We're not talking about Wombian Caves Road here. There are no land uses along Foxgrove Road that would generate large volumes of traffic or conflict with larger vehicles, apart from perhaps one of the objectors who parks his business trucks and machinery on his property. Now, one would question whether this objector has approval for a truck depot, which is a prohibited land use and may warrant investigation by council's compliance officer. In summary, the proposal is fully compliant with council's development requirements. The proposal has received concurrence from both Water New South Wales and the Rural Fire Service.
Mr. Hogan, Mr. Hogan,
Yeah, you can talk. He's on mute. He's been muted, so you can.
yeah, I can't, Mr. Hogan, your time has expired, and so we will take your comments. I'm sure council will take them into consideration. And I'm not sure how much you had to finish off, but the rules are the rules. So thank you very much for your address. Okay, so councillors, we now go to visitor item and we start the business paper, 9.1 page 3. And Mr. Theodore Onisferu will address council in support of the development, which is proposed change of use of an approved boarding house development nearing completion to service apartments. Mr. Onisferu, are you present? Connecting. Okay, can you hear me, Mr. Onisferu? Mr. Onisferu, can you hear or not? You may be on mute. Hello, can you hear? We are connecting now, I think. Okay. Mr. Onisferu, you have the floor for the period of 3 minutes to address the 5 minutes to address your DA.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. You
Wonderful.
may need to pull the computer top down towards you. We're having trouble seeing. That's better. Thank you.
Okay. I'm in bed. Hope you don't mind.
That's totally up to you, sir.
Great. Okay. Look, I'm a good, respectful citizen of the Shire. I think any development that I've done in the Shire has only brought pride to the Highlands. And I realise that there is a car parking deficiency allegedly with regard to this development, but I think that council needs to view this in the bigger picture. The bottom line is everybody is talking about tourism as a way of generating employment in the area. Employment, it brings money to the Shire. It ultimately seems to be our main future is making money is tourism. We've all seen the tourism study, et cetera, et cetera. The position is simple. There is a lack of accommodation in town. If there wasn't a lack of accommodation, I wouldn't contemplate this development. I'm not stupid. There is a lack of accommodation in town. And clearly, if there's no accommodation, they go home after a day visit. But if they can stay the night, the longer they stay, the more they spend. Without beds, they can't stay. Now, the reality is this is the best gateway hotel site in the township of Mayoral. It's in that wonderful location where it's a short walk to so many restaurants, so many pubs, etc. People do not need to get into their cars to go out. And that's its main advantage, that you don't need to get in your car to go out for a drink. Now, with regard to the parking deficiency, we've stated to council that there is excess parking in Funston Street. Anytime, if you take away my builder's cars there Monday to Friday, anytime I drive down Funston Street, there is a complete no cars parked there at all. But yet we've got council's officers saying there is no room in Funston Street, and wait for it, because there's excess traffic from the medical centre down the road. I mean, that is just wrong. I won't say it's untrue. I'll just say it's wrong. And what I suggest with the greatest respect is this, is if truly you can see the macro benefits of increased tourist accommodation, then let's not rely on one council officer that says there's no parking available in Funston Street. Let's get a study done. And can I make this offer? One, that we go half and half with the cost of the study, independent study of what's available in Funston Street. Secondly, in the alternative, if council's officer proves to be correct and there is no available parking there at the relevant times, I'll pay for the report. But if council's officer is wrong, then council should pay for that report because he is clearly, completely and utterly wrong. Now, at the end of the day, I'm really proud of this development, along with every other development I've done in town. I am really enthusiastic about the prospects of town. It may or may not give you joy to hear I bought 2 industrial sites in Mayoral town, and I'm intending to develop them soon. I love Mayoral town. It's a growing town. There's great opportunity there. There's great opportunity for people to do good developments. I do good developments. At the end of the day, unfortunately, there is a minor deficiency of parking, but there's more than enough room to park cars on Funson Street. And if council is minded to be open to what I say is council's report is wrong, there is no shortage of parking in the street, and let's investigate that issue before we knock what is otherwise a sensational development in the gateway to town, in the best location. That's all. That's less than 5 minutes. And sorry, may I also ask this? In the alternative, why don't you give me a 5-year only approval, and then let's reevaluate after 5 years. That's 5 years is long enough for me to prove myself correct. And similarly, if I'm wrong at the end of 5 years, you can shut me down. So at the end of the day, that's an alternative, but I think I suggest to you that is unnecessary. This is the outskirts of town.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Honest-Faru. Are there any questions to Mr. Honest-Faru from councillors? Councillor Turland?
Yes, I'm just looking at the drawings, and I can't see in the drawings, maybe I'm not in the attachments. Is there any stacked parking in relation to your site?
We often,
Stacked.
you mean horizontally or vertically?
Stacked behind each other.
No, we haven't.
Not
No, they're all the parking spaces are independent of one another.
You are aware that you can have stacked parking?
We actually suggested car stackers, but council wasn't enthusiastic.
Hang on, can I get a clarification from council staff, please? Councillor Turland has made the comment stacked parking is that it can be done. Can I get a comment from the staff, please?
Through the chair. Obviously, car parking requirement is at grade. There is no ability to provide stacked car parking, which is generally cars parked behind one another.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Honest-Faru?
I agree, which is why we offered vertically stacked.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Scans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Honest-Faru, how many vertically stacked car spaces could you install, and roughly what would be the cost to you to do that?
Well, respectfully, the cost should not be relevant because it's not relevant to me. Every parking space can be a stacked parking space.
So how many would you end up with in total?
We would have more than the council requirement.
Right. That's because we don't have a local car parking plan. That would be an alternative.
Scandrett, you are asking questions. Are you entering into debate?
Thank you.
Is there another question from any other councillor? Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Honest-Faru. You've got approval to have a boarding house here, Mr. Faru. I was wondering, was it always your intention to go for a change of use, or can you give us a reason why you might have moved that way?
Because when I spoke to some of the agents in town, because I was trying to get an idea of what it would be worth. Sorry, I had been told what it would be worth to rent on a full-time basis or 6 month leases, which was completely satisfactory. But then a number of agents said to me, if you use this with Airbnb, you can more than double your expected rent. And I hadn't thought about it. In other words, this was not a sleight of hand where I've gone from one to the other. It was just something that I didn't know much about. I hadn't contemplated it. This style of boarding house, and I invite you all to go and have a look at it, because funnily enough, I had a look at the boarding house approval for number 2 Walker Street, and those rooms are 12 square metres each. I don't know, is anyone acquainted with that DA?
We'll leave that one alone, Mr.
Well,
Honest.
okay, well then, if I can then, okay. Well, they're the minimum size, they're 12 square metres each. Each of my rooms in this development are 35 square metres. To me, this is what a boarding house should be, which is room enough for people to live in there happily for a long period of time. So, and I really do invite all of you to just go to site and have a look at it. I couldn't be more proud of this development. I'm looking for other sites to do exactly the same, not as hotels, but as boarding houses. But it is such a gateway location. I'm constantly approached by sporting organisations.
Okay, we are entering into a bit of a sidetrack from the question. So, and I think the question's been answered from Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir. I see here in the pre-lodgement meeting on page 12 that the development was discussed at a pre-lodgement meeting with council officers on the 21st of July, and the applicant was advised that the application would need to address the key issues of adequacy of car parking. You're 18 car parking spaces short.
No,
Now,
I'm not. Respectfully, that's wrong.
Okay.
The report actually identifies it as 18 car parking spaces in the report.
May I answer?
I didn't think that was correct. I thought it was 9. Yeah.
Page 7 says the proposed service apartment development generates 18 car parking spaces.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask staff to answer that after all councillors have finished their questions with Mr. Honest Farouk.
May I answer that question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Yes, when I saw the council at mid-year, the development was well and truly built and we were fitting out, and I contemplated the alternate use. I was told by council that I'd need 17 or 18 spaces. I only had 9. And again, if I put a stacker on each space, then I would have the full 18. The deficiency is not 18. Let me be absolutely clear about that. And also we contemplated, because it's in town at that meeting, that there'd be some people that would happily take a train to come down to the Highlands and not have a car at all. And that we shouldn't be enslaved to people that supposedly drive everywhere, because there's plenty of people that would actually be dropped off. Also, if you had 2 couples come down in the same car, they would only occupy 2 rooms. They would only occupy 1 car parking space. These are all things we put to council, but it appeared to me that council's officer was not prepared to balance the benefit of having the most gateway hotel in the whole of the Highlands visible. I can't tell you how many people ask me if they can put their advertising banner on the corner.
Thank you for that. I stand corrected, sir, on that.
Okay. Can we leave that? Is there any more questions to Mr. Honest Farouk from councillors? Then we'll put you in the waiting room, Mr. Honest Farouk. Thank you for your address, and councillors will deliberate your request.
May I ask, what am I going in the waiting room in case I'm required again?
No, you have, you'll be, your time has extinguished and we'll just go on with the meeting and you can view online.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move option 2 with a rider.
Please, I think council, there's been questions raised. I would like staff to do an introduction.
Thank you. I'll
Exactly.
Thank you. Mr. Will.
Through the chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 210513, which seeks development consent for a change of use of an approved boarding house to service departments at 19 Funston Street, Mayoral. Council to be aware that the consent was granted in 2018 for the purpose of a boarding house consisting of 16 units and also a manager's residence in an existing dwelling on the site. The construction of that development is nearing completion, and the proponent is now seeking to alter the use of the site from a boarding house to a service department facility. The site is zoned R3 medium density development under the Windsor Local Environment Plan, and service departments are permissible with development consent. The site occupies an area of approximately 2,079 square metres and is surrounded by existing established residential development. The merits of the current proposal include the change of use to 17 serviced apartments and a manager's residence, a 2-lot subdivision, and demolition of the rear wing of the existing dwelling on the site, 10 on-site car spaces, and provision of 4 additional motorbike spaces. Council staff note that the concessions were provided to the current development under the affordable rental housing set, which enables provision of only 9 car spaces on site. Under the change of use, serviced apartments trigger the requirement to provide 1 space per serviced apartment and 1 per 2 employees. This represents a 44% departure from council's DCP controls, with no ability to provide additional parking on the site. The change of use does not allow for alterations to the built form to protect the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties, which is expected to particularly impact 457 Housekeeping Road by virtue of increased level of activity at the site. Neighbouring notification was undertaken in accordance with Council's community participation plan for a period of 35 days between the 12th of October and the 16th of November 2020, with 3 submissions being received in that period, citing inadequate car parking and also fencing issues.
Okay, do we have any questions to Mr. Wilton? Councillor Turl.
I have 2 questions. The first question is, can we do a 5-year approval to test the impact?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, council could limit the use of the site to a serviced apartment facility for 5 years. However, it doesn't address the practical concerns relating to car parking at that facility and the departures from council's DCP controls. Okay,
and the second question is, the Mayoral spare parts site, there was about a $1.8 million shortfall in car parks. It was about 17 by memory, or maybe more. And council, in their approach there, was to, if the developer gave the money to council, the 1.8 million, in the shortfall of the car parks on that site, it would approve the development. Is there not an opportunity to provide the same option to this development of a cash payment in lieu of the car parks, as we did with the Mayoral spare parts building in Mayoral Street?
Through the chair, at this point in time, there is no current ability for council to provide that parking off-site in Mayoral. There is no contributions plan that would support that, and council wouldn't be able to enter into a VPA on the basis that there is no identified future plan or a future ability or facility to provide that car parking spaces.
We imposed those conditions on the Mayoral car park and the Mayoral spare parts side of Mayoral Street, did we not?
No. Through the chair, no, we didn't.
Okay. Are there any other questions to Mr. Wilton? Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I raised before the question of car parking contribution plans, which Councillor Turlin's raised. In the opinion of the staff, the car stackers, the quantity of 8 car stackers would suffice. Is that correct?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, the development control plan contemplates at-grade car parking. In relation to stackers, that is not something that's considered by the development control plan to be appropriate for obviously any site or any development in Barra.
Yet they're used elsewhere in the state and of course in Sydney. Mr. Wilton, would a contribution in lieu of that get us moving with a car parking contributions plan?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, as previously mentioned, we don't have a contributions plan in place, so therefore we can't consider any contributions in relation to parking shortfalls.
All right, well, I'll raise that in my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, is that Halstead? Nelson. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I just clarify what is the parking deficiency? Because further down the road, there was a development that was 32 car parking spaces short, and the road there was completely full of traffic. So we're just moving up a couple of blocks. So I'd just like to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair, I believe there's 9 car spaces deficiency on this site. 8, sorry.
Okay. So just to clarify, 8 car parking deficiency spaces or spaces that are deficient. Councillor Scandred, you've asked, I think, a number of questions.
I'm ready to move a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scandred. If there's no more further questions, is there somebody to move a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's me.
Thank you, Councillor Scandred.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move option 2 with the addition of the, and I've sent this to our meeting.
Pre-plan.
Option, I've just sent it now, with the addition to option 2 that the additional 8 car parking spaces be provided via the provision of car stackers over existing car parks.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
I believe I do.
I'm looking for a seconder.
Well, that's interesting. I would have thought I did.
Okay, so your motion lapsed for a seconder. Do I have another
For
councillor?
the purpose of, I thought I had a seconder for the debate. Is that correct?
No.
No, you don't. Councillor Tiller.
Honestly, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly.
I'll move option 2, but change it to a 5-year approval only. And then if it's not satisfied, the car parking and any other conditions of council, will revert back to a boarding house as originally approved.
So you're moving a 5-year approval to be revisited and subject to conditions not being met will revert to a boarding house.
Correct.
Okay, so we will wait until we get that worded up.
Did we get a seconder for the three?
Now, do I have a second? No seconder for Councillor Scandred's motion, but Councillor, so it lapsed rather than one of the seconder. Councillor Tillman has moved a 5-year time.
I'll second that.
So you're seconding Councillor Turlins. Now, do you, Councillor Nelson has his card up to speak, but I would like to get the motion up first to make sure everybody is clear. Can you read that, Councillor Turlin, to make sure you're happy with that?
Well, the development application will be posted for. We haven't got the 5-year. The 5-year period. Stands consent. You want me to keep going?
Well, I can't see 5 years.
Yeah, that's right, written there.
5 years, and that the acting general manager be delegated to impose standard conditions of consent. What we need to add in there, that in the 5-year period, in the 5th year, further surveys and conditions that the council wishes to trying to work investigate or research, whichever is the right word, of any adverse parking that occurs in the street the council staff report it back to council for consideration in the 5th year. If
That'd be a new.
A new paragraph. If it is found that there is adverse,
You can't start.
that if there is found to be adverse congestion in the street, council will instruct that the development returns back to a boarding house as the past approval. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have speakers for or against? No speakers for?
Well, I'll speak now if I wish.
Yes, you may.
Okay. As you all know, that tourism is the only way that we can actually move forward in the Shire at this point in time. And it is what we do best in our Shire, is to invest in tourism. The problem we face at the moment is we don't have accommodation. Things might change in the future. There's an opportunity now to test this development to see if there's any adverse effect on the community and the roadworks, being Frankston Street. And if there's not, it would seem reasonable to allow it to stay as a service department. But if there is an adverse effect to the community and parking, it will revert back to the boarding house which is currently approved. I would think that people would stay in the development if it's worded as a boarding house or a service department. So what we've got ourselves into now is just the technical issue about the car parking contributions or the car parking shortfall. And I would think that in 5 years, we will actually see if there's any adverse effect, as Mr. Theroux has said. It would be a shame to lose this particular development, as we have the Mayoral spare parts site, where we've lost the accommodation that could be used for tourism within the Shire. Council has to look at the long picture here, not the short picture. It's exactly what we need in the Shire, and we need more of it. I do get, it's a shame it wasn't approved in its state as it is now, being a boarding house, not a boarding house, a service department, because there might have been a chance to reduce maybe one unit to allow more parking. So that be, we are where we are at the moment. We should not lose this opportunity to allow tourism in our Shire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. Any other speakers? Councillor Andrews, then Councillor Nelson, and then Councillor Scandrett. So I'll say take someone speaking against the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm speaking against. I'd like.
No, hang on. Woo. Is Councillor Andrews speaking for or against?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to flag an amendment. If the amendment's a direct negative, at least foreshadowed.
So would I.
Okay, so Councillor Andrews had his card up first. Your amendment, it's not a foreshadowed, it will be just an amendment?
No.
I need to be checked. It'll be option 1 of the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if option 1 of the recommendation is the amendment, do you have a seconder for the amendment?
No, it's a foreshadow because
It's a foreshadow, it's a direct
the
negative.
report recommendation is a negative.
Right, so it's a negative, so that will come forward subject to the successful passing or not of the motion. So is there a speaker against the recommendation?
Yep, me.
Yeah, so it'll be Councillor Nelson. Then I take it you're speaking in favour of it, Councillor Scandrett? Yes, and then it will be Councillor Scandrett, then Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd like to move a further foreshadowed motion that the application be deferred and that off-site car parking be evaluated on the impact that the development may have on the adjoining streets.
Okay, you can't speak to it. You
No.
can-
Well, you can move that as an.
we have a foreshadowed
Yeah, but it's not.
amendment, and now we have a foreshadowed amendment.
Further foreshadowed.
So you can only read it out, you can't speak to it.
Okay,
Councillor,
I'll just go again.
Clarification, Councillor Nelson's not a foreshadow because it becomes an amendment, because it's not a direct negative.
the amendment, he cannot speak to it.
But it's not a direct negative.
Moving it as an amendment now, he cannot speak to it.
You can if it's
Yeah, with respect, Mr. Mayor, it's another motion. It's not a direct negative.
So, excuse me, we are dealing with the motions that they are put to the chair. You, the councillor Turland, has a motion to the chair. Councillor Andrews has a foreshadowed motion, and then Councillor Nelson is moving a
I thought it was a further foreshadowed motion.
or further foreshadowed motion.
If I can say, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Nelson wants to move a deferment, he can move it as an amendment to the motion.
That's what I was saying. Are you
Okay, I'll move it as an amendment then.
Okay, thank you. So you're moving that as an amendment, but Councillor Andrews
Yes.
is still standing up there. So you're moving an amendment, which you didn't say. Do you have a seconder? Councillor McLaughlin.
I don't think the wording's right either.
But the wording is now being questioned by staff, so let's get it right.
And then we'll have to go to Councillor Nelson to complete the table the rest of that.
So make sure when it goes up, Councillor Nelson, that you are happy with it.
So
Be deferred.
Yep.
And that off-site off-site car parking be evaluated on the impact that the development may have on adjoining streets. Whether that makes sense to the staff.
I'll ask Mr. Pepping to see whether that is permissible. Mr. Pepping?
yes, Mr. Mayor, what we would do is we'd go to our transport planning engineer and seek some advice on that if it was deferred.
Okay, so it is permissible, Councillor Nelson. Do you wish to speak to it?
We need a second.
No, you've got a second to Councillor McLaughlin.
Okay, I got Councillor McLaughlin. If I'll speak to it, it's just that Mr. Honest Farouk mentioned about came up with the idea of parking review there for Funston Street. And I do know that further down the road, the issue was that car parking deficiency of 32 car parking spaces. And when we did an on-site inspection, the street adjoining the proposed development was completely packed out with motor vehicles. Now, Mr. Honest Farouk does have a point in that, and I think he may be right in that there isn't many cars parked up in that street adjoining his property or the adjoining streets. There could be at least for 8 car parking spaces. So the reason that I'm seeking that deferral is to get exact clarification of off-site car parking in relation to his proposal. Admittedly, he did say that tourism is one of our major factors. Well, yes, I'm not sure that his development is going to really improve it that much. I think he's seen that, or he got the advice that he can make more money out of the change, and that's what's prompted him to do this. His proposal has sort of thrown the council off, and that's why I want to defer it. It's just buying us a little bit more time to reevaluate this, because I came, after reading the report, I came here to adopt the recommendation, the staff recommendation, and refuse it. So now I'm at a bind after hearing Mr. Onis-Faru. So that's where I'll be standing, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we had a tourism destination strategy breakfast in December, and yes, there's a lot happening at the moment. COVID has driven many, many visitors from the 5 million plus in Sydney into the Shire. And it's done finally what we as a council have tried to do for many years, and that is fill up the towns, the businesses midweek. So this proposal is timely in that it does provide accommodation at now where the demand is also. I mean, there's no, if you check with our tourism people, the weekend bookings are very strong, and they have been for quite a while. Of course, they peak in spring and autumn. But the midweek destination business is what we really are after, and our businesses were after, and that was covered in that strategy in the workshops. So I wanted to find a solution to this. Now, it's very interesting the staff say that we have no provision to consider car stacking. Well, we haven't got any provision not to consider car stacking, and this is a multi-storey pitched roof development, so the car stackers are not going to be a particular impost visually, and yet they would resolve the issues here. But look, I didn't get a seconder for that, so I happily support Councillor Turlin's alternative, because we need to move forward. The Shell garage, the spare parts opposite the Shell garage was a classic example of our own regulations didn't accommodate the solutions that could be had. There was a discussion there about additional parking and levying a contribution on that developer, but we aren't in a position to deliver that because we still, and I've been on council 9 years, we still don't have a car parking contributions plan. And that's a plan where we say we're going to acquire sites in the future, and we're going to levy for parking that's not provided in the meantime on developments and apply those contributions there. And of course, that's what they do in all of the urban councils.
Councillor Scandrett, we are not talking about contribution plans, we are talking about a development. So can I ask you to come back to the debate, please?
Anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'm supporting Councillor Turlin's motion because it gets moving forward and provides a level of accommodation, particularly for midweek visitors going forward. I welcome that in all our major towns.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I like Councillor Nelson was going to move the recommendation put up by staff. But after hearing the comments from Mr. Onis-Faru, and I do agree that we're only talking about 8 car parks here, 8 cars. It seems a bit, disingenuous to cut off our nose to spite our face on this one. Look, I think the suggestion put forward by Councillor Nelson is a good one. It doesn't knock it out. I was tempted to support Councillor Turlin's motion, but I thought 5 years was far too long. I think we would know within a year or 18 months, we'd know if it's a problem. But anyway, look, I think this is a sensible way, and I think we can all support this. If it's not going to impact too heavily, I'm all for supporting it. That's fine, but let's get more information because we can't let, developers all across the Shire, even with good reasons, not stick to what we need for car parking in our towns. So I think this is a sensible way to go. So councillors, I would endorse that we defer this and we get staff to have a look from our traffic engineers, and we come back and we know with proper information whether it'll work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Halstead?
Thank you. Well, I'm for the amendment that's now been put.
Right, thank you.
Look, I've listened to the debate and it's been pretty exhausting, but nevertheless necessary. Initially, I would have taken the view that there was a major problem, and I still think there is. You know, a developer comes in, he puts in an application for a boarding house, which I'm sure, and I know that, you know, when that was advertised, the community was against it. And I think, quite frankly, they'd be more against that than that they would be if they had an option of service departments. In other words, service departments gives a better connotation, I think, and ultimately a better outcome than the boarding house. That's my personal opinion and town planning opinion. But, you know, the issue that worries me about Gary Turlin's one is that who the hell decides what's reasonable or working or not working? It's going to be a real doubtful decision-making process or subjective viewpoint on whether something works or doesn't work. I'm not too sure how you determine that, but and in any event, the thing that really worries me is the 8 car park deficiencies, because it's all very well for someone just to say, oh, it's only 8 car parking spaces. Quite frankly, it's a major problem, but nevertheless, I'm going to support Councillor Nelson's because it gives us an opportunity to get a reasonable feedback from someone that does know what they're talking about in terms of parking, both on and off street parking, and to be able to liberate it, you know, on the matter then. So I certainly originally had some concerns about a boarding house in that location, and I figure that, quite frankly, what's proposed now is a better option. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, my reasons really for pushing for the recommendation of staff is that, you know, the applicants had ample opportunity to correct the deficit in parking spaces due to the fact that it was mentioned at a pre-lodgement meeting. But I do think it's worthwhile testing parking on Funston Street, and I can see where this is going. So, Mr. Mayor, I formally withdraw my foreshadowed motion, if that's possible. I haven't got a second.
No, well, you can't have a second because it was we had to vote on the first one. So, but we have an amendment to the motion, which has been moved by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. If there's no other speakers, Councillor Turlin will have his right of reply. So nobody else has got their hand up. So Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, with the seconder, if you would be happy to change the motion to 2 years instead of 5.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
And then I want to add one other thing in there.
It's really, councillors, with your right of reply, there is the right of reply, not to formulate another motion to try and get support. Otherwise, I will ask you that it be not included and that you make a motion, a foreshadowed motion. But you can't, on the right of reply, change your recommendation to garner support.
Well, I think this is the first time you've brought that up, and I don't believe that's in the code of meeting practice. But anyway, so if you the 2 to 5, but also so that the traffic committee gets to evaluate the issue. So where it says council, it's the traffic committee, it's council's traffic committee. Okay, that allows the qualified people to make the decision.
Mr. Mayor, the right terminology is local traffic committee because it's not a council committee.
Sorry, you're right, Councillor.
Yeah, local traffic committee.
Local, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, where we are at the moment, as Councillor House has said, the boarding house was in question right from day one, as boarding houses are a state SEP that approves them to be built within a distance from public transport, mainly the railway station and post office in town. So the issue now is that it's a shame this wasn't put through from day one as a service department. the planning of the units look like service departments. They look a lot more generous than a boarding house would be in most cases. So where we are at the moment, as the applicant said, that 4 people could come in 1 car, and therefore we are not needing the extra car parks because the 2 parties would go into separate rooms. And this would happen on quite often, where lots of parties come together and you don't need all the car parks. But this gives an opportunity to test the issues over a couple of years and then let the qualified people come back and evaluate if there's going to be a problem. If there's no problem, then the conditions of a service department will continue. But if it becomes a dramatic problem, it can revert straight back to the boarding house as currently approved in past years. There's a lot of money that's been spent to date. The building is ready to go in the next few weeks, I would imagine. It would be a shame not to allow it to go forward and test the market over 2 years. It's not asking a lot of council to just give the approval, have it open as a service department for the benefit of the wider community right through the Shire.
Thank you. Okay, so all those in favour of the amendment, it's a planning matter, so you can hold up your card. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your card. So that's Councillor Andrews, McLaughlin, Nelson, Halstead and Gare. Those against? Councillors Whipper, Scandrett and Turlin. I declare the amendment lost. The motion lost. The amendment now becomes the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. Voting the same way. Oh no, Councillor Whipper. I'll read the names out. Councillors Andrews, Councillor Halstead, Councillor Whipper, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Nelson and Councillor Gare. Those against, Councillors Turlin and Scandrett. Thank you. We now move on to 9.2, Development Application 21-0212, Subdivision of Land and Carrying Out of Work for James Fairfax Drive to create 2 lots. Do you need an introduction, councillors?
Yeah, no? Yes, please.
Yes, please. Councillor Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, the purpose of support is to consider DA 21-0212, which seeks development consent for the purpose of subdivision of land and carrying out of works to create 2 lots at 1 Sir James Fairfax Circuit Barrow. Land is currently zoned R2 low density residential and occupies an area of 2,004 square metres, with a minimum lot size that applies to this site of 1,000 square metres. The proposal was notified between the 25th of August and the 14th of September 2020, and it attracted 3 submissions detailing concerns around solar access, cumulative impacts, vehicular traffic, and also other subdivision concerns. Response to those issues are detailed on pages 25 and 26 of the report this evening, and council staff assess the application and recommend approval on this occasion.
Thank you. Any questions to staff? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Wilton. Just wondering how many 2,000 square metre blocks there are in this subdivision in total.
Do we have to take on notice? I don't think it'll affect the debate, but there are.
What I'm trying to ask is, are there a lot in this particular area? Are they all 2,000 square metre blocks?
No.
No.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm just inquiring, once the applicant subdivides the land, could the corner block be further subdivided again?
Good question, Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, if there was a further dual occupancy application that came forward to council, that corner allotment could be further subdivided, providing that obviously the water and sewer is available, and the resultant lot is 1,000 square metres, which it is.
Okay, can I ask a question? And that is, can some form of instrument be placed over the land to stop further subdivision or not?
Through the chair, an additional section 88E restriction on the title could be placed on there. There'd be no further subdivision of that lot. But that restriction would have to sit over the top of clause 7.2 in terms of a dual occupancy would be permitted to be subdivided. So.
Okay, so some councillor may want to take that into consideration. Then if there's no further questions, I'm looking, councillor Scandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And look, Mr. Wilton's comments there are most appropriate because we have had debates about this. I'm quite happy with this application.
No, do we have
my
a question? Yes.
Yeah, my question is, what would be the appropriate words to put in a motion to achieve that section 88E reference?
Thank you. That's a good question, councillor Scandra. Mr. Wilton.
Through the chair. Council would have to apply an additional condition of consent on this subdivision that prior to the issue of a subdivision certificate, that a section 88E instrument under the Conveyancing Act be prepared, preventing any further subdivision of those two resultant lots.
Thank you. If I can move the motion with that, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scandra, please, you do this all the time. Councillor Halstead.
Look, I agree with the 88E instrument because once again we're going to be inundated, or the proof of the pudding is that these
Councillor Halstead, question.
Well, I suppose the question would be, can we please add that then to the recommendation, because that's what should be happening.
That is a good suggestion. Okay, so now any further questions? I think Councillor Turlin had his hand forward. Do you have a question, Councillor Turlin?
No, I was going to move something, but I'll wait for you to ask for people to move something.
I will do that, and I will ask somebody to move a recommendation. Councillor Turlin.
Move the recommendation as listed in the report. Okay, so the recommendation as printed with subject to conditions as described. Is there a seconder?
Sure.
And Councillor
Scandra seconding.
Amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder, and an amendment moved by Councillor McLaughlin. Now,
Yeah, thank you. The words that Mr. Wilton referred to with regards to an 88E added to that the original motion to prevent a further subdivision
of the corner block.
Yes, that's correct.
Not a seconder. Councillor Whippert has raised his hand, so you have a seconder.
Thank you.
Amend the motion.
Yep, I'll just.
So we will amend the motion. Councillor Whippert, Turlin is moving the recommendation, so the amendment will take into consideration your Mr. Wilton's comments. So we'll wait until that goes up, so we're all clear.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Is the motion and the amendment the same thing?
Not now.
No, they're not now. The amendment is to put an instrument on it to stop further subdivision.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Turlin, while that's going up, I think we know what the outcome of the amendment is. So do you wish to speak to the recommendation?
Yeah, for 2 minutes.
We have Councillor Whippert. Councillor Turlin.
The developer actually designed these lots if they intended not to allow these corner lots to be. Sorry, I'm here, people. Sorry.
We can hear you. All a bit muffled though.
Every now and again, there's somebody cutting in. Anyway, long and short of it is the developer, if he didn't wish it to be subdivided at a later date, he should have understood requirements. So therefore, at this point in time, it is legally the right of the owner to do what he wishes to do on this site without complicating us, council, putting an 88E instrument. Is that me who's actually causing the problem?
Yes, you.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry?
The sooner we get into the chamber, the better.
I've turned it down, hopefully that'll work. Anyway, the long and short of it is, it's allowed, it complies. It really should be up to the developer to apply any conditions that they wish not to have, of which has failed under the dual occupancy issues at this point in time. And if the developer wished to have the 88E instrument on the site, he should have put that in when he did the linen plan and the subdivision itself. At this point in time, the site complies. It complies to be subdivided, and it can be subdivided again on the corner lot, complying with the LEP and the DCPs that we have in current position, even though we had a briefing earlier this morning on that purpose. So it complies, and therefore it should be approved.
Thank you. Well, I don't think that that's not agreed to. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the amendment. I think it's a responsible thing to do. I take on board Councillor Turlin's perspective, but we've heard very loud and clear from the residents out there at Fairfax Estate and their concerns about what I would see as the exploitation of corner blocks. And I think it's not only isolated to Renwick, the Fairfax Estate either. It's happening all over the place. So I think this is a really sensible course of action. And I think it's up to council to set that standard. If we leave it up to the developers to make their own rules, my God, I'd be really concerned about that. So I think if we put this precedent in place, maybe it's something that we can use in terms of precedents to set a standard of expectation throughout the community for developers to comply with. So I'm happy to support the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr. Mayor, during the debate, I pointed out that I wanted my name taken off the motion by Councillor Turlin because it didn't include that 88E clause. It was, which I thought was part of his motion. Okay. So please remove me from there.
Thank you. I didn't. It will. Just wait there, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Turlin, Councillor Scandrett has withdrawn his support. Do you have a seconder now for your Councillor Andrews? Is seconded your motion, so you still have a seconder. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Scandrett?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This 88E instrument, it's essential going forward for all the reasons already discussed. I'm also concerned there are other opportunities in the estate. So the sooner we can get that instrument in place, the better. But I support the amendment there for, as I always have, it's 1,000 metre blocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Halstead, then Councillor McLaughlin? I assume is there anybody speaking in favour of the recommendation after Councillor Halstead? Okay, Councillor Halstead.
Look, with all due respect to Councillor Turlin, who I regard very highly, particularly with his building skills and what have you, the fact is that the developer at that time obviously had no idea about clause 7.2 or about whether there'd be any restriction on corner blocks. Otherwise, he would have had that agreement, or whatever you want to call it, in place that was actually legal, which it wasn't, which a lot of people fell for it and have suffered the consequences or paying the consequences. But I think from that point of view, therefore, we've got to go along with the second one. It's the only way you're going to protect that corner block. Otherwise, we're, again, going to be stuck in this business of people doing this. I've got no problem with the 2/4 acres. They're permissible. Land use, zone permits it, blah, blah, all done. But we've got to try and protect that corner block. And I have no qualms at all in saying that I totally disagree with clause 7.2. You all know that. And this is a way of making sure on that block that that's not going to occur, redevelopment.
Thank you, councillor Housestead. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll just speak to the amendment quickly. Yeah, Councillor Housestead is absolutely correct. I'm sure Mr. Fairfax and Alan, who worked for, they had no idea about 7.2 clause. I mean, they were trying to preserve and create a top-notch development with large blocks that people could enjoy the amenity of a really prestige estate. And what they're seeing out there is blocks being cut up and cut up. And we know, we've all heard from them, how distressing it is for people to find that they've bought into an area where they thought the minimum size was what it was, only to find that it could be carved up. So it's caused a lot of stress to a lot of people out there, and I think this is the least we can do, is to put this 88E on this block so that we don't see a windfall where one block turns to 3. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nelson, you've got yourself muted.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was going to speak in favour of the amendment. There's been quite a few there, but look, just quickly, the owner of the land is actually a qualified planner, so he knows that technically he's working within the planning laws. We did an on-site inspection there today, and the house that's already built next door is set well back with good landscaping, and now all of a sudden he's going to get 2 houses built next to him when the wish of the Fairfax estate was 1 house, 1 block of land. Now, you know, and if this 88E gets appealed against, then the adjoining neighbour could have 3 residential buildings built next to his property, where he's put his one residential building on the 1 block. So, you know, it's pretty tough. I mean, last year I changed my mind to vote for the rescission motion to send the corner lot subdivision to the Land and Environment Court. But anyway, that didn't get up. And so we didn't get the opportunity to test the legal opinion from Fairfax Planning Panel in court. So hopefully the owner's happy with the financial gain that he's going to make by subdividing this land. And hopefully the 88E holds good to protect the adjoining neighbour. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Nelson. Do you need the right to sum up, councillor Turlin?
If you look at page 44, look at page 44 of the plan of the site, you'll see there's only 1 block that's half an acre. All the blocks across the road behind it and across the road are all 1,000 square metre lots. All of them are. So this is just changing it to match the rest of the blocks within that subdivision. Across the road is a vacant block, which is 1,000 square metres, which could still have a dual occupancy built on it because it complies. So I don't see where there's a problem in subdividing it. And you're putting a restriction on this block when he turns it into 2 blocks on an 88E that stops dual occupancies, when the one across the road is vacant at the moment, which can have a dual occupancy and probably will have. So you're restricting one owner against another. And it complies at the moment on dual occupancies on corner blocks. You are preempting something that might not happen. But as I said, if you look at page 44, directly across the road is a block that could have a dual occupancy, as it is a vacant block now. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Turlin. All those in favour of the amendment as moved by councillor McLaughlin and seconded by councillor Whipper, please raise your card. Councillors Housestead, Whipper, McLaughlin and Nelson and Gare and Scandrett. Those against? Councillors Andrews and Turland. I declare the motion lost. The amendment now becomes the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. And the voting pattern is exactly the same way. Those against, councillors Andrews and Turl. So those names are recorded as such. We now move on to page 48, 11.1, tender for the Seymour Park Playground. Would somebody like to move?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Option 1.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin was a bit quicker. Councillor McLaughlin seconded. Moved by Councillor Scanlon, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. All that is the tender for Seymour Park Playground. All in favour? Those against? Carried. I'll ask the Acting General Manager to read out the recommendation that was just passed.
So, Mr Mayor, the recommendation the council just passed for the tender for Seymour Park Playground upgrade is as follows. The council accepts the tender from Lamont Contracting Proprietary Limited at a lump sum of $491,006.29, inclusive of GST, to undertake the Seymour Park Playground upgrade.
Okay, so we move. Can I ask whether councillors are prepared to move 11.2, 11.3,
Yep.
and 8.4, which are acquisitions of land but must be discussed in closed? Move Councillor McLaughlin, second Councillor Halstead, that they be moved, voted on block. Put that. All in favour, they be voted on block. So that's carried. I now put the en bloc motion that 11.2, 3 and 4 be considered en bloc. Put it. All in favour? Carried. So we move to 11.5, investment report November 2020.
Mr. Mayor, I've moved 11.5 and 11.6.
11.5 and 11.6, investment reports for November and December 2020. So Peter, Councillor Nelson's moved that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Turland. Is there any discussion on the investments? Then I've put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. Moving over 12.1, page 68. Development applications determined from 24th of November to 22nd of January. Somebody move that. Councillor McLaughlin and Halstead.
Yeah, move that.
May I say, there were, just for those who are watching online, 150 DAs determined between November and end of, which is
that a bit of a record, Mr. Mayor?
I don't think it's a record, but it does show that there is a lot of activity on the Highlands. And last night we had the pleasure of the chair of the CRJO, as well as the chair of the JO, Mayor Rowena Abbey from Yass, and she heard the figures of how many DAs we processed in the term that Mr. Pepping had pointed out, and I think she was totally flabbergasted. But there's the applications. Councillor Turland.
We're on DA determined, are we not?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the issue is that they aren't all in 1 month. What they are is the first number 1 is 162 days. You go to the next page, number 6, 219 days. Number 8, 98. It's not all in 1 month. These could be in for nearly a year before they get determined. So it's wrong to say that they were determined in 1 month, in November and December.
Councillor Turland, these are the DAs that we determined in that period, not the time that they were lodged. That's the period.
I understand that, but you are saying it's a great record when you have up to 238 days in the process. That's not a very good record.
Okay, I think you're missing the point.
No, I'm not missing the point.
My son has lodged a DA in Huddersfield, and he is prepared to wait 2.5 years to get his DA through. That's how slow they are down there, apparently. Okay, I put the recommendation, all in favour. Against, carried. We move to 12.2, development applications received from
Move that way, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin and second Councillor Whipper. Is there any discussion on the DAs received? I think they've gone up. So councillors, we discussed ones that wanted to be called up. Can you look at that list to make sure that it is correct? All right, everybody's happy with that, then I'll put the recommendation, all in favour, against, carried. We move to 12.3, post-public exhibition, planning proposal to amend.
Councillor Standards, please.
I'd like to move this, Mr Mayor.
Okay, now I've just been pointed out, Councillor Scandred was waving his card. Is Councillor Scandred, I'll go to you.
Mr Mayor, I've not received the form to call up the sewage works on site for stage 1 of Chelsea Kamunji, which would have added it to this list.
No, that's a separate.
Wasn't listed.
Separate. You have to get signatures for that.
Yes, I've asked for the form. It hasn't come in as yet. Just thought I'd recognise that. Thank you.
At 1 o'clock this afternoon.
It won't get on the agenda.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it won't get on the agenda anyway. So I take your point, but it's a separate issue to what we are discussing. Councillor Halstead.
He's on mute.
Councillor Halstead.
Item 147. I'm just wondering if that one that's headed Benelog Property Group is anything to do with that horrific development that was came to our notice a couple of months back.
Well, look, we have just put the motion.
Yeah, but I just want a question from the planner. That's all. Pretty simple.
It's a weekly circular coming up, and no, it's not the same as that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're on page 110, and it's the
Yes.
Commission, and it was moved by
me, Mr Mayor.
by Councillor McLaughlin and
12.3.
by Councillor Whipper.
Oh, was it? The heritage item, I thought I moved it.
Yeah, you moved it, and it said.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
Okay. Look, Mr Mayor, I can just briefly speak to it just briefly, that this is a very good outcome. My understanding is there was comments from 5 neighbours. They're all very supportive that this beautiful old bit of Barrel real estate has now been purchased, and the new owner is very satisfied that it will not be. He's happy to have a lovely garden, and I think you'll find that a lot of these old heritage houses in Barrel, and I'm thinking of Aiken Road, have all been bought by people that really want to treasure them and treasure the heritage that we've got in our town, rather than seeing them all just cut up into little boxes and developed for, by developers just for greed. So it's nice to see that some of the old part of Barrel is still worth money, and people will pay big money to live at 32 Kangaroo Road in Barrel. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
There ends the sermon.
Here at the end, Councillor Turley.
I think Councillor McLaughlin owes an apology to the people that might wish to develop by saying it's greed. I find that offensive, and I think you'll find quite a few other people find it offensive. Mr Mayor, you need to, Councillor McLaughlin, you need to.
I'm not saying greed is bad. Some people think greed is good, and to a certain extent it might be in different cases, but I'm just saying that the support in the community to keep some of old Barrel is very important.
Somebody
I'm not against
three
development.
houses,
Not against
three
development.
houses, you class yourself as not a developer?
Thank you, councillors.
I know who's the greedy one.
I will ask councillors that they refrain from using language that can be inflammatory.
Time for the mute button.
So we put the recommendation as moved by councillor McLaughlin and seconded by councillor Whipper.
It's a
All
planning
in
matter. It's a
favour?
planning matter, so we need to show.
It's a planning matter, so we've all got to vote on it. It's
Thanks,
carried
Gary.
unanimously. Move to 12.4, communication strategy, page 122. Do we have a mover?
Can we have an introduction to this, Mr. Mayor?
Well, it's been moved and seconded by councillor Nelson, Andrews and Nelson. And we will ask Mr. Summers to give an introduction.
Good evening, councillors. The report before you is a review of council's existing communication strategy, originally adopted in late 2014. It is not a new strategy. Within the paper, you'll see the majority of suggested changes are administrative in nature, including amendments to data and references. The theme and direction of the original strategy is largely unaltered. Now, while the strategy is not descriptive, in the years since the original adoption, we're now seeing many of the recommendations of this original document, such as the messages, the taglines, theming and distribution, becoming mainstays of how council interacts with our residents. So this review is designed to build and progress on those foundations laid in the original document, and hence the recommendation is to endorse the revised strategy, public exhibition, and invite feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. That was short, succinct, and right to the point. Question to Mr. Summers, and I think councillor Turl, and then councillor Whipper. And Scan.
So the question I've got is, sorry,
councillor Turl,
this is the communication policy. How does this integrate with our? Sorry.
No, it's your feedback. Oh,
okay. How does this?
Can you turn off your?
How does this relate to our consultation policy? Are they integrated together? Council's consultation policy and the communication policy. Are they integrated in any way?
Mr. Summers.
The communication strategy, this revised strategy, and our community engagement strategy, they work very closely hand in hand. They're dovetailing in many aspects, so they do work very closely in hand, councillor. So
then there's nothing in the communications policy that locks in the consultation policy we have.
No, it's a separate policy.
No, because that really comes under the community engagement strategy, councillor.
Yeah.
Okay, councillor Whipper, did you have your card up, or were you just holding up a page?
I was just holding up a page, Mr. Mayor, but look, I'd just like to congratulate Mr. Summers on his resilience and perseverance, because in spite of all our best efforts in terms of communication strategies, Mr. Mayor, it's surprising, isn't it, how many people out in the community just don't know what's going on. I mean, it's a really hard task. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and hope that we get some good feedback from the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Whipper. Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett, you've muted yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Summers, I'd like to acknowledge your efforts in that space. But of course, the challenge is about all types of communication. Could you refer me to where in this policy and its associated policies we talk about outdoor signage and directional signs to council things, such because I'm interested in that. I know some others aren't, councillor, but I don't interrupt you.
Councillor, sorry, Mr. Summers.
Through the chair, councillor Scandrett, the strategy isn't prescriptive, so every single project, council or job would be different. So we ascertain them on their merits. if the feedback from the residents following the public exhibition is that they'd like to see more corflute signs erected on council jobs, projects or developments, well then by all means that's something we could investigate.
Well, and just for council consultations that we regularly do in our villages and towns. Thank you, Mr. Summers.
Thank you. It's been answered. Any other comments to Mr. Summers? Okay, and so we have a recommendation, but moved by Councillor Andrews and seconded by Councillor Nelson. But I, again, and I think unless you know the work that it goes in behind the scenes by Mr. Summers and Michelle Bell on the amount of communications they actually do on behalf of council, it is an extraordinary. I'd hate to know how many press releases he does in a year. But anyway, and write speeches and everything else. We have a recommendation. I'll put the recommendation, moved by councillors Andrews and Nelson, carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Summers, and that is I think, a letter of endorsement from council. 12.5, council policy review. To councillors, move Councillor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Scandrett. Any discussion?
Short introduction, please, Mr. Mayor, because a couple of questions.
Do you have we'll do an introduction, and then I think Councillor Turland has a question. Thank you, Ms. Lingard.
So council's undertaken a review of its policy register, and we've identified that a number of policies have now been superseded or incorporated into other strategic documents and no longer relevant. So this report presents to council 10 policies that for approval to repeal.
Councillor Turland.
Number 9, can you explain what number 9 is? 2008 adopted.
Mr. Mayor, I might be able to answer that. My understanding, recollection, is that the council introduced a policy where a property might have been severed by a road and how to deal with that in the planning context. Now, this predated our 2010 LEP, so there was no way of dealing with it, but we've now got a process through that 2010 LEP as well as the Act that covers that situation.
Okay, the other issue is number 3, for instance, equal employment opportunity and grievance policy. I would have thought that the OLG would have forced updates to a lot of these. They're number 4 and number 3, even number 8, risk management policies long before now. We're talking 1997. So the OLG has not updated these policies by themselves, like the.
I'll answer that if I may, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. These documents are now being dealt with what we call GM practice notes. So they're internal operational documents. They're not actually policies of council, but they're very comprehensive documents that we use internally, and they are regularly updated internally. They don't come to council because they're operational documents.
Oh, so when it says 1997, you've already made some changes over the last 20 years.
Many times,
Sorry?
councillor, many times.
Yeah, okay. So this normally doesn't come to council.
Well, we've just not bothered, we're not taking the opportunity to clear these up, really. They should have been taken off the books long ago because we've got internal GM practice notes and procedures.
Okay. So this is just a
housekeeping.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett, and then Councillor Halstead, and then Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we have a comment on number 7 as to the recent or over time use of that policy in terms of the responses and why we think it's now going to be superseded by technology? And also number 10, which I raised just prior to Christmas, workplace bullying and harassment policy, because I was concerned about our adhesion to that. Is that going to be superseded also by state legislation? Thank you.
Well, I'll try and answer the second one first. In relation to workplace bullying and harassment, as you've been advised, councillor, there is a GM practice note and there are a number of internal procedures that deal with workplace bullying and harassment. You've also been advised that there is comprehensive training given to the staff regularly, every 2 years in fact. So we deal with that in a very comprehensive way. Again, this is an old policy that really should have been redacted some time ago. In regard to the reward scheme for reporting vandalism, I've been here a long time and I think I can remember one occasion where someone has tried to actually make some sort of a claim against that. It's not really effectively doing anything. Mobile phones, those sort of things these days make reporting vandalism very easy. There's snap, send, solve and various other means. So I don't think that the policy is really having the effect that it probably was thought it would at the time it was adopted.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Howard, then Councillor Whipper.
Yeah, my comment's pretty basic, and that is it's an appropriate list to remove, and the explanations given by the acting general manager are totally appropriate, so I support my couple.
Sorry, Councillor Halstead.
He was supportive of it.
I just said I'm supporting everything that's there, and it's totally appropriate. The list has been put there, and I certainly listened to and accepted all those matters spoken on by the acting general manager.
Yeah, good on you. Thank you. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mentioned it earlier in the day. Number 6, noxious weeds management. If we go over to page 140, I accept the fact that the policy be rescinded and it morphs into the Biosecurity Act. But given the growing concern around the world about the impact on bee populations through the use of glyphosate, I'm just wondering whether or not the Biosecurity Act, which it should, does take into consideration the use of glyphosates in weed management.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Whipper, when this report has just come up in front of me, it's tweaked my memory from the conversation we had earlier today. I've sent an appropriate email to the relevant staff to seek some feedback on that matter. I will come back to you and inform you what we find.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Just in relation, I did expand a little bit on that to our conversation this afternoon. If we could find out if the Biosecurity Act actually refers to the use of glyphosates and its direct impact on native bee populations.
Okay, I'll be more specific with my request to the staff. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
Would you be happy for that to go in the weekly circular, Councillor Whipper?
Yeah, look, that's good enough, and see what comes from that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so that is an aside, or do you want that as part of the recommendation?
Oh, no, that'll be taken on board.
Yeah, that's good enough, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy with that.
You'll get an answer, Councillor Whipper, I'll give you that guarantee.
Okay, so recommendation moved by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Scandrett. All in favour?
Yep.
And those against, it's carried. So we move over to page 12.6, page 143, draft code of meeting practice, moved Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Is there any discussion? Councillor Turlin?
Yeah, just a question, and I'll put this to all councillors. On page 13, public questions from councillors. Item, 5 minutes, and questions from councillors. As we've heard tonight, and we hear all the time, it's never really enough time for the public to have their voice in front of all councillors. And we used to allow an extension to allow people just to finish what they prepared. I think we should be extending both items, will have the opportunity to extend to allow the public to have at least their say to all councillors. 5 minutes is not a long time for any of the community to have their voice. I prefer the old system where we could allow an extension of time so that the public did have an opportunity. It's the only time they get all councillors in one room to talk about whatever they wish to talk about. So I'd like to put an amendment in both of those two positions, 5.5, a visitor item, and public forum, 4.11, that we allow the councillors to determine an extended time to allow the public to have their voice.
I'll support that.
That would be visitor items.
Visitor item is page 15, item 5.5, to allow council laws to approve an extension of time for the visitor or public
Forums, both.
to present their issue to all councillors. And on page 13, 4.11, public forum, same as above.
Can I ask, I'll ask staff to comment on that, Ms. Lingard?
I might make a comment on that, Mr. Mayor. I urge a little bit of caution because the Local Government Act limits the time for councillors to speak to 5 minutes in a council meeting. I think we need to go away and do a little bit of research, because when we allow the public to speak, my understanding is that they are bound by the same rules as the councillors are in that forum. So I hear what you're saying, Councillor Turley. I would like the opportunity to do a little bit more research, if we may, just to see whether we have the leeway to do what you're suggesting. I'm not sure at this stage.
You want to put?
Didn't we change that, Mr. Paul, and made it 3 minutes for councillors to speak? If I'm not, I think I'm correct on that. It used to be 5.
Yes, so councillors, yeah, that's correct. I mean, you've ordered your own code of meeting practice to only allow councillors 3 minutes to speak. You used to have 5, and 5 is the maximum that's allowed for a councillor in a council meeting. Committees of council are different. They're not bound by the requirements of the Act, although you can restrict the time that you speak within committee meetings. So there is a limit for 5 minutes in the Act for councillors in a council meeting. I believe that when you invite people to speak at the council meeting, they have to comply by those same rules. So I just want to have the opportunity to research that.
So item 3, if you wish, Mr. Paul, you can put in exactly that for you to research.
Well, perhaps we can bring it back.
Item 1 and 2.
Further report, or is that?
Yeah, item 1 and 2. Yep.
We'll bring back something to the next meeting to give you advice on what you want to do. You might be able to do it.
Yep.
Any other councillor wish to make comment? Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look,
just before, Councillor Nelson, Mr. Paul wishes to do an addendum to his.
Well, I've just been given a bit of sage advice. Perhaps we should defer the actual exhibition of this document until you've had that opportunity for us to come back and give you that advice, because otherwise I'm going to be going out twice.
I was going to do. Councillor.
Well, I was going to raise the motion. I don't know what other interest there is in that, because we've been through all this and we changed it back because the council meetings were going so long because everyone was being extended. Every time someone spoke, they were extended. So, and then if they get 7 minutes, no way. And we have question time at visitor item anyway. If you work it right, you ask a question, the applicant gets to expand. So it goes on and on and on. Oh, I'm going to vote for the motion. I'm dead set against the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, well, so we have a motion and amendment, but it's been moved by councillor Turlin on both occasions, so that can't happen. We have the motion moved by councillor Turlin and seconded by councillor McLaughlin. And
Well, I'll move the motion.
Then you're going to have to move.
Motion's got to go.
The motion, councillor Turlin, you have moved both, and I think you tried to join the motion and the amendment as one motion. Is that correct?
Remove the motion, I'll keep the amendment.
Okay, so there is a motion now. You will withdraw your moving of that, and councillor Nelson will move the motion. And
just one other thing we need to add in item 3.
Well, yes, please, councillor McLaughlin, you're still happy to move to second the original recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask for a point of clarification?
Yes.
Just on that point, if councillor Turlin moved both motions, wouldn't it be appropriate if he withdrew the original motion and the amendment?
He was just doing it.
No, he has. He is now moving the amendment
as the motion.
And councillor Nelson is now moving the motion, and it is still being seconded by councillor McLaughlin. So then the amendment is being moved by councillor Turlin and seconded by councillor Smith.
No, I think you missed my point, Mr. Mayor. Given that councillor Turlin had moved both motions, whether that was accidentally or not, I would have thought that he could have removed his original motion so that his amendment would then become the motion.
No, well,
it doesn't matter.
Excuse me, I hear what you're saying, councillor Whipper. I was under the impression he was trying to add his amendment to the motion, but he is prepared to move that as a separate motion. So that makes the first part of that redundant. So as such, councillor Nelson has taken it up. I hear what you're saying, but councillor Turlin, and I didn't pick that up until just now, that there were two separate issues there. So that is what I'm ruling. You have a motion and amendment. And councillor Turlin, you have spoken to the amendment.
Just a correction if I can. We need to add in item 3 that we defer this item until the acting general manager.
So could I make another suggestion? I'm not
yes,
going out of the debate, but the amendment probably really needs to be turned around a little bit different. Could I suggest that item 3 be item 1, because that's what you're asking me to do?
Yep.
And that item 1 and 2 actually become a subset of that, if you like. So they're not actually recommendations. What you're asking me to do is to go away and review matters that are shown by. Otherwise, you're actually approving two things, while at the same time you're asking me to go away and do some research.
Understand. Yep. Understand. Yep. Understand.
So rather than that up with the documents, take that out, just point 1 and point 2.
All right.
You get me?
So we're all clear on that?
Yep.
Make them 1 and 2.
So I'm going to now put the amendment moved by councillors Turlin and Sanders. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand or your card. Councillors Hounsted, Whipper, Turlin, McLaughlin and Scandrett. Those against? Good, sorry, that's the wrong way. Wherever mine is, I'm voting against it. So, all right, so I declare the amendment now become, we have the motion, moved by councillor Nelson and McLaughlin. We have the amendment, so I'm against the amendment. So the amendment now becomes the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. Councillor Halstead, Whipper, Scandrett and McLaughlin. Those against? Councillors Gare, Andrews and Nelson. I declare the motion carried, noting that Councillor Turlin had left the room and did not take part in the vote. 15.1, petition, complaints concerning 115 Railway Avenue, Bundanoon. I'm moved.
Oh, I'm happy to
I'll
move it,
move
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to move it. Can I make a comment, Mr. Mayor?
I need a seconder. Yes, you can make a comment.
Yes, councillor Scandrett, thanks.
Councillor Scandrett. Now,
I thought I'd moved it, but never mind. Mr. Mayor,
Councillor, please.
Oh, I thought
This
I
has raised a great deal of angst in Bundanoon. I'll ask Mr. Pepping to make comment to this petition, and I'll have a few words to say, and then councillors will make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In late 2020, the state government, through the Department of Fair Trading, has introduced a code of conduct for the operation of short-term accommodation premises. So council effectively has no responsibility in the ongoing management or inspection or the conduct of those operations. So a person may lodge a complaint with the Commissioner for Fair Trading about an alleged failure by a person to comply with the obligations under the code. Complaints upheld will result in the first instance, a warning to either the guests that might be causing the problem, the host that allows it to happen, or the host's premises. The second phase would be a monetary penalty. There could be a strike against either the host, against the premises that the host owns, or the guests that were in the premises at the time that the non-compliance was occurred. And as a last resort, the host, the premises or guests could be placed on an exclusion register, which means that they are then prohibited or banned from either being guests in any such premises going forward, or for the premises to be used as a short-term accommodation. So this is a code of conduct that applies the whole of New South Wales. So obviously we're part of that, and that's where it goes. So complaints are lodged through the Department of Fair Trading.
Okay, now, Councillor McLaughlin, you wish to make comment, and I think Councillor Andrew had his card up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I have made contact with some of the people that in regard to this petition, and I did contact Mr. Pepping, and I got that explanation that he's just spoken about, and I did pass that on. Look, this is not before time that people should be entitled to enjoyment of their amenity, and if you're living next to a party house that's rented out every weekend or every night, it gets a bit much. So people have got to respect the amenity of the area and conduct themselves accordingly. And 90% of the people do, I believe. But when you get a big place like that with a massive amount of people from a wedding or something, it just seems to easily get out of control. So the information I passed on to one of the gentlemen out there that has written to us, I did tell him about where to go and to the Department of Fair Trading. And so I'm sure that this will be something that will be followed up. So I think it's good that the state government has finally brought this in, because it's you know, a couple of times they've had a couple of goes at this, and then they've squibbed it right at the last minute. So it's good to see that there is protection for the community out there, and that people can't willy-nilly just turn up and destroy the amenity of their neighbourhood and then move on. So I really endorse what they've done here, and it's good that it's not council that has to deal with it or council rangers, but when the police are called, I'm sure that is noted and then that can be passed on. So yeah, I endorse this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Now I did do a call there, Councillor Scander, I think, then Councillor Nelson.
Just a brief point, Mr. Mayor. By noting this, that it be noted by staff as well. Is that the right word, by council and planning staff?
No.
Okay. Oh, sorry, what was that?
Well, council's the organisation.
Yeah,
fine.
planning staff by the council. Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Scander has finished.
Yes, Councillor Nelson.
I was just looking for guidance that maybe we should change the motion.
Yes.
We should change the motion to say that the complaint at Railway Avenue, Bundanoon, be referred to the Commission of Fair Trading for its information and action.
No, I'm getting a shake of heads from
the.
I don't think that is legally binding or permissible.
Well, they need to. They
need to.
I know they need to, but the you know, if the Commission of Fair Trading gets a petition forwarded by the council, it should carry some weight.
Well, I've had a phone call from the police in relation to this, and they made the effort to call me directly, and they are limited on their capabilities. So the people themselves are the ones that have to, as I've been advised to by staff, they're the ones that have to push it.
So I suggest, Mr. Mayor, we can forward it on for information, but we can't make a complaint.
We can't make a complaint.
No.
But we can write a letter of support. Can we write a letter of support?
We would forward the petition on for information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'll endorse that. Forward it on. Good idea.
Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, just a simple one, Mr. Mayor. Can someone elaborate in a sentence or two, staff member obviously that would know something about it, as to what has occurred there? Has it occurred a number of times, and what is it that's happened? Just general disruption or what?
I missed that.
I think Councillor Halstead is asking whether the staff can elaborate on more what's happened down there. I'm not sure we can. I would suggest that we probably only know as much as we know from the actual petition itself.
That's exactly right, Mr. Acting General Manager. So it is currently being used for short-term accommodation. There are accounts that there's been large groups occupying the premises. It is a large premises. But councillors also might be aware that there is currently a development application before council to develop the site as a seniors living development. So that is under assessment. Now, depending on where that finishes and if it gets approved and constructed, well, then obviously the nuisance that might exist there now will disappear.
Thank you.
So we'll do an appropriate response back to them, because like said to me, I've been asked to forward this petition to you from Ms. Liz Morse. So we'll respond to her and also the resolution of council. And but I hear the concern of councillors themselves, and it has been ongoing now for a number of years. So, but there is a DA in for further development of the site, which will then stop it being used from a B&B, I would assume. Okay, so we have the recommendation as moved by Councillor Scander and McLaughlin. Put it all in favour. Those against, carried. We move to page 148, 16.1, minutes of the Sport and Rec Advisory Committee. Moved by Andrews and seconded by Councillor McLaughlin.
By the way, there's an omission, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't at that meeting, but it doesn't note that I was there, but maybe that could be changed.
It can be changed now, councillor,
Yep.
that it being endorsed subject to noting that councillor McLaughlin was present at that meeting.
Right. Thank you.
Put it, all in favour? Those against, carried. Minutes of the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, Tuesday, 1st of December, moved by councillor Whipper, seconded by councillor Nelson. Is there any discussion? Then I'll put it, all in favour? Those against, carried. We move to page 16.3, minutes of the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I like the title at the top there, the introduction, if you see the word heritage. So moved by councillor McLaughlin and seconded by councillor Nelson. Is there any discussion to the minutes?
Mr. Mayor, councillor Councillor Scandra might be interested to read, because he was asking me questions with regard to a certain hotel that's been redeveloped, and the minutes refer to it in there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor McLaughlin. Any further discussion? Put the minutes, all in favour? Those against, carried. We move to page 17.1, which is a question with notice. Proposed eco-tourism facility from councillor Turland. Councillor Turland, you happy to move the recommendation?
I move the recommendation, but may I ask for an explanation from the staff in relation to the DA itself? In the sense of, it's not existing use rights, it's continuous use rights. Is that how I understand? Because the LEP has changed in 2010 to E3.
Look, through the chair, look, unfortunately, Mr. Wilton had to leave, but I'll try and answer the question. My understanding is the use of the premises for camping purposes goes back to around the 1980s, primitive camping facilities, etc. And it was abandoned for a period of time. Under the 2010 LEP, when the property changed zoning, whatever it benefited from existing use rights and whatever back then, how it was approved, discontinued to exist.
Correct.
So this use accommodation in an E3 zone isn't permitted with consent. However, the use as an eco-tourist facility is a form of tourist accommodation that can be accommodated under the E3 zone, and there are provisions under LEP 2010 that facilitate that. So the proponent is now seeking a fresh approval for it to be used as an eco-tourist facility, as opposed to a tourist accommodation or whatever that it might have benefited from before.
So would it be fair to say that the applicant, when purchasing the site, thought he had some continuous use rights, but then realised he hadn't, and the only way to legalise the process is to lodge a new DA under the change to the LEP in 2010?
Look, I'd have to take that question on notice, councillor, because I know that there was a much earlier application in, and I just don't recall how that transpired. I don't know if it was withdrawn. There were some court proceedings that were occurring at that time. This is an application that came in 2019, so it was a much different application. As I said, it's reverted to the eco-tourist facility provisions of the LEP, which make it a more, I guess, permissible use compared to what it was first lodged as under a previous application.
All right. So you're moving the recommendation, councillor Turland, and seconded by Do I have a seconder? Councillor Scandrett?
Councillor Halstead had a question then, you didn't
Yeah,
answer
that's
him.
right.
Well,
I just want to make a statement, Mr Mayor.
we can still take comment. We've got a mover and a seconder.
That's all right.
Yep, you've got the floor, Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Some years ago, I think, when this first started, I think following a complaint from Councillor McLaughlin, I think kicked it all off. The owner, don't know his name, don't really care, but he rang me. I'm trying to think what position I was in. It might have been the mayor then. I don't know. I don't care either on that one. But and he raved on about he had these sorts of uses and this, that, and the other. I said, look, the number one thing you've got to do is go and seek information about the historic use of this land. Go way back, former owners, you know, because he kept harping about this scout camp. So I told him without any doubt that it was most unlikely he had existing use rights. So that's the story with existing use rights. He had none, he's got none, and he's not trying to use them that don't exist anyway. Obviously, clearly now we've got the new DA. That's just a bit of history for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, just add to the history. I remember that under the day, or in the day when Sarah Murray and Peter Reynolds were on council, that this site created a lot of interest, and there was an inspection undertaken out there, and I think there was illegal works happening. So, you know, this idea of existing use rights sort of very questionable. And of course, now council can't find the file on the matter as well. So that makes it even more interesting. But anyway, he's now submitted his Eco Tour application. We'll see where that goes. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr Mayor?
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, I'd just like to correct something that might have been said with regard to this proposal. Some of the neighbours, well, one particular neighbour came to see me, as he had a right to do, and he gave me a memory stick and pardon me, with regard to some of what was shown on Facebook of what was going on at this property. And he was concerned that there was no approvals for what was happening. And all I didn't make a complaint. I basically just passed it on to Mr. Wilton to check out to see whether, you know, what was happening out there had approvals. And as it turns out, it didn't. I think the gentleman's before the courts because of it. So that was my only involvement. A resident came to me with a complaint, and I passed on the email. I did get a phone call from Mr. Marley, and he wanted me to go out there and have a look at what he was doing. And I said, well, why would I do that? And he said, well, you made the complaint. And I said, no, I haven't made any complaints. All I've done is just passed on something from with information from the neighbours to check out the veracity of what was happening out there and whether it was had approvals, because it was seemed to be disturbing quite a few people out there. So that's my explanation. I thought I'd better clear that up, seeing that Councillor Halstead mentioned I'd made a complaint. All I did was pass on a complaint, if you like. Thank you.
And to your credit, you did what you may not even want to do, but you did it as duty as a councillor. So anyway, that puts that section of it to bed. All those in favour of the recommendation moved by Councillor Turland and Scandrett, please raise your hand.
Noted. Yeah.
Right, carried. We move to question with notice 17.2 Station Street project. Councillor Turland, would you moving the recommendation?
No, I'm going to move that. My first question, where it says that when will council, is that council provides an update to the community on the cost benefit analysis on Station Street project.
Well, I think it's in the answer. It's been...
No, that's not for you to say that. I'm putting the motion forward.
Thank you, councillor Turtle.
It's all right. And that number 2, that council provides an update budget and changes to Station Street to advertise to the public to comply with the public consultation policy.
Could I have a point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Nelson.
Look, my point of order goes to the fact that we have this provision for questions and we get an answer, and now all of a sudden we get what's really a notice of motion. I'd like to get a comment from the staff whether what Councillor Turlin is doing is legal or not.
I'll ask our legal opinion.
Look, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Paul will make comment.
Councillor Nelson raises a valid point. It's a very fine line. A question with notice is just that. It's an opportunity for a councillor to formally ask a question of the staff, which the staff respond to in writing, and we're required to do. If a councillor then wants to bring a matter back to council that I guess expands or moves away from that in any significant way, I tend to agree. I think there's not proper notice of that, and it would probably need to come via a notice of motion. Now, it's a bit of a grey area, but that's my 2 cents.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I haven't been offered the opportunity to evaluate this issue because Councillor Turlin has now actually changed his question into what in effect is the notice of motion, and I think it is completely out of order because it changed my approach to this whole item. Either you have a question with a notice and you get an answer, or you put in a notice of motion. Fair's fair.
Yeah, I will be, Councillor Turland, I'll give you a right to make comment, but I will make a ruling in a minute.
Well, it's allowed under the Code of Meeting Practice, but if you look at the bottom page, it says recommendation put by council staff. In it all, the whole council process, councillors can change the recommendation that council staff put forward. That is standard practice. So the issue here is I've asked a question. Councillor Nelson can read what council staff believe is the case, and therefore we can debate the issue as we would normally do. So what we've got at the moment is legal under the Code of Meeting Practice, of which we just went through less than 10 pages back. So for somebody who's been in council for 30 years, one would think that you would think he's either right or he's wrong, but he should know that under the Code of Meeting Practice, I have the right to do what I've got in front of you at this point in time.
Okay, I will make a ruling that
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak, please.
Excuse me, Councillor Scandron, I have the floor. I will rule that there'll be no further motion permitted, and that if any further information is required, which changes, as Councillor Nelson has pointed out, changes the flavour of what was asked, then that will be required to come forward under a notice of motion by any councillor who wants to put in a notice of motion. But the question has been answered, and as such, any further information will require a notice of motion. I'll move to Councillor Scandron, then Councillor Whipper. Councillor Scandron.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You all received a response from the staff just before the meeting today on the cost benefit analysis question, and it hasn't answered my questions that were in there in terms of the total project value, which if those reports, well, it was said in last December that the project is now at 32 million and rising. I mean, we need to have a look at this cost benefit analysis and putting it back. Now, Councillor Turlin, I would have been happy to support what you just put up if one was maintained and your 2 points were 2 and 3. And Mr. Mayor, if you're not happy with that, I'm happy to put up a motion of dissent right now so that we can debate it. because this is a very important project. It's very topical, and it's now just so much out of control financially, having gone from 9.5 million to over 32 million, plus all of the bits we've taken out. We need to take it to the people. So would you like me to move a motion of dissent on your ruling, or would you reconsider?
Any further motion will require a notice of motion as per the Code of Meeting Practice.
I heard that, Mr. Mayor, and I'm respectfully saying that I'm moving a motion.
If you wish, you can move a motion of dissent on my ruling, yes. So if you're moving that way, then you can do so.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I will move so that your ruling be not heard and the matter be heard now. I think that's what I've got to say.
Okay.
It is.
I have one.
Councillor Turlin. Then.
Just a clarification, are we going to debate the motion that's in front and no further from here on? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Mayor?
The ruling that I make is your questions have been answered in relation to the questions that have been answered. And at this stage, there is nothing to stop you to putting in a notice of motion, but we can't just keep, because councillors want further information that are not on the business case, keep raising different issues. I've got no issue with a further notice of motion, but I'm following meeting practice. So
can I just have a clarifying point of the acting general manager? He just mentioned to us, it was a grey point, it's not in the Code of Meeting Practice. So you are ruling something that's not complying with the OLG's Code of Meeting Practice.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. If the councillors overrule my position, then that is the will of council. But my ruling is that the staff have answered the question, and for the extra areas of information you want, it is to require a notice of motion. Now, Councillor Whipper has had his card up there for a while, then Councillor Houston. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I wanted to avoid any conflict, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to be argumentative, but look, given that the acting GM said it was a grey area, it would be my opinion, and again, it's my opinion, being on council for 20 years, that councillors do have the right to move a motion arising from a question with notice. We've done that in the past, and also to move an amendment. I think this is very convoluted. If a councillor asks a question, gets information, and based on an informed decision from that those answers, then moves towards a notice of motion from the floor, I just think that's very cumbersome. So I believe, Mr. Mayor, and as I said, I don't want to be argumentative, but my reading of it would be that a councillor does have the right to do that from the floor.
Councillor,
Well, we have to vote on the ruling.
Councillor Halstead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I hold the view that the notice of motion should be dealt with, but I also agree with what you've moved. And to that point, the notice of motion, in my view, should come to the next meeting. But I'm rather disappointed that we didn't get a more definitive answer from the acting general manager, which would lead me to believe that the Code of Meeting Practice is deficient. Would he like to comment on that one?
Well,
look, the only extra comment I'll make, it's about whether proper notice has been given of this matter. And that's where you're moving from a question with notice to then propose motions. And it's really a matter of whether there has been proper notice given to council and the community of the matters that are going to be debated. Now, with a question with notice, it really depends on how far you're straying from that question with notice, in my opinion. Yes, you can move amendments. Yes, you can move recommendations from a question with notice. But there's a limitation to that. It can't be a notice of motion in disguise, if I can put it that way, with the question with notice.
So,
Yeah, well, can I just add further to that, Mr. Mayor? Look, I agree with that. I don't think there's any intent from the councillor Tyrrell in this case to manipulate the system or anything else. He had a question, he got an answer, and he thought that, believes he's in a position where he could move a notice of motion. But I'm firmly of the view, and I'm no expert on this side of things, that the notice of motion should come to the next meeting.
thank you, Councillor Halstead. Look, we can go around in circles. I think we'll put it to bed. So the motion or the dissent motion as moved by Councillor Scandred, I will ask to be, and seconded by Councillor Turland, be put that the council, where is it? The ruling of the mayor. So I'll put that, all in favour of Council and Scandred's and Turland's dissent motion, please raise your card. Those in favour is Councillor Whipper, Scandred and Turland. Those against is Councillors Andrews, McLaughlin, Nelson, Halstead and Gare. I declare the dissent motion lost. So if you wish to bring back a notice of motion, then that's the way to go. Councillor Turland, have you got any more, or do we put the notice?
No.
What
What I'm going to say now is, if you can take some notes, if you wish, Council. In 2017, the budget, September 17, was 9.5 million for Station Street. 2019, it was 16.33. In the finance meeting of the 1st of October 2019. In 2020, it still was 16.33 in the finance meeting of the 30th of June. On the 1st of July 2020, it jumped up to $18.262 million. If you then go to the mathematics that I'm going to read to you now, is that in the finance meeting of 2020, it was 18.262 million. Wattle Street car park, which is in all our documents under the Station Street project, is around 3 million. Kirkham Road, which is also part of Station Street because it's the parking issue that were removed from the northern end of Station Street to build them on the western side, is around 5 million. And that adds up to two spots. The northern part of Kirkham Road in 1819 was 3,021,000. And in 2020, the southern end was 1.8 million, with the extras being the extra curb and gutter and also the water main rectification or extension. So we go back to Kirkham Road, around 5 million. The purchase of State Rail is around $500,000, which is the area where all the shrubbery was removed last year. The Minigon car park is $1 million, which is stated under all documents in relation to Station Street. If you add all those figures up, we now have 29,362,000. $29,362,000 if you add all those things up which relate to Station Street, which are all documented in all the reports that I've just mentioned. We have the unfunded works, which is in our unfunded financial documents. The second bridge over at Windsor-Carriby Street of 12 million, and the second stage, which is from Links Road to Barrel Street, of 15 million. Both of those would probably be very underrated budgets now for the future. We have the new budget now of $13.938 million, which was on the 9th of December, which takes the first stage to $43,300,000. If you add the unfunded works, it's now a $70 million project, $70 million project from Links Road all the way through to Bundaroo Street. This is extraordinary. Some common sense needs to come into play here. If you're prepared to spend $43 million from Barrel Street to Bundaroo Street, adding all those things up, which has all been part of our documents to date, this council needs to be removed. This is unacceptable, spending half our rate base on one road.
Your time has expired. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Scandrett.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Gear, what's happened here is, well, I said 42 million some years ago, and that number's now apparently quite correct because we've now got the whole picture. And as sadly, I have to say that, like Malcolm Turnbull, I think, said in the Spycatcher case in the UK some years ago, the truth has been handled carelessly. Well, that's certainly somewhere in here, it's all got murky. Over $70 million for a project that started out at $9.5 million, not 3.5 years ago. It's extraordinary. And here it is, it's going to soak up so much of our budget from all over the Shire. I mean, we've got $423 million in unfunded projects out there. And this is going to soak up all of those small projects and some big ones. The Mossvale Bypass, the Mayoral Bypass, the Lackey Stadium. We could get cracking on all of these. In fact, the original money would almost finish the Mayoral Bypass on its own. That is from Barrel Street to Links Road. And of course, there's a number of issues in there. We own the land other than a couple of little slithers. We're good to go with preparing the costings on that. The Mossvale Bypass, we need to get going on that, and we need to take up some of the planning and get that land acquired there. Lackey Stadium, Councillor Andrews, let's get moving on that, and some of this money can move that forward. But the public are clearly against it. I've never heard one loud voice saying this is a fabulous project, Station Street that is, but I've heard a lot of voices saying we want the bypass, stage 2, and we want to get a resolution of the issues at Wingecarribee Railway Bridge and the like. So, look, Councillor Turlin, we've got the numbers now in front of us. We now know that the revised costings are 32 million, and we've taken out some 20 to 30 million already out of the original scope of the Station Street project. It's just extraordinary that this has gone that far. But councillors, a motion will come to next meeting. It'll pick up some of the detail from the cost benefit analysis question that you've all received the response to. But I point out that that is not fully answering my original question. That is, what is the basis, the cost basis for the project? Well, that's a rubbery number, apparently, a rubbery number.
I'll refute that, councillor.
Well, that is your opinion. So without any, but just out of interest, Councillor Scandrett, it will take probably another 18 months to get any sort of true costing for Mossvale. And you're right, and I will concede that it is just very poor form that when this grant was given so many years ago from the state government, that there wasn't an absolute true costing done at the time, and I will concede that. I'll put the recommendation as moved by Councillor, be received and noted by Councillor Turlin. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay. Question with notice, Mittagong Pool.
So who seconded that? There's no second.
Councillor.
Because we've got it.
It was moved by Councillor Scandrett. Was the one in relation to Station Street?
That'd be noted.
That's
Councillor Turlin and Scandrett.
Okay. Question with notice, Mittagong Pool. You moving this, Councillor Turlin?
On the previous one, we still haven't got a seconder to the motion to have it noted.
It was Councillor Scandrett.
Oh, good. It's on the, put it on the document.
Yeah,
okay, that's fine. Okay.
There now, you're moving the recommendation be received and noted.
Yes, but I just wish to make a few points if I can.
Sure.
Do we have a seconder?
Could you do me a favour and mute Councillor Nelson so I don't get interrupted all the time?
Councillor Scandra. Councillor Tootle.
May I have Councillor Nelson muted so it doesn't keep breaking into as I'm debating?
I didn't hear any, I haven't heard anything, sorry. Councillor Tootle, the floor.
Thank you. If you go to our last document that was sent out, the annual report, it actually clearly shows you that the pools have been closed since 2015 for pretty well 3 years or 4 years up to where we are today. The answer there tells you exactly how much was spent, $6.5 million. We're still paying back the interest on the $2.943 million that Prue Gowd gave us back in 2014-13. So if you add up the extra cost of the ballast tank of 110 or 101,000, we don't know what the cost is for the last flood in 2020. And we now probably have a $6.5 to $7 million pool that's been closed more times than it's been open in the last 5 years. Is it time that we start to think that we're spending good money or bad money, good money into bad again by continuing on building a pool in a river? This is going to continue. Climate change is upon us, as Councillor Whipper would say. We need to look after the community's money, but also their assets. This has been a bad decision, building back in the pool, back in the creek bed. We had an opportunity to build it out of the creek using the 82 piers that were introduced under the new floor once it blew out in the first 6 months. We failed to take that chance. So what we have at the moment is a $6 million or $6.5 million, because we don't know what the cost of the last problem in 2020 is, of a pool that's built in a creek bed. It's not going to get any better. It hasn't been open for probably 4 years out of 5, and it's closed again now. When do we make the solid decision of getting it right to stop wasting public money? This is what I tried to tell you guys before. We need to make decisions for the long term, not for the 4-year cycle of a so-called council election. There's some statements made that there was 1,000 people signing a petition, and that was probably right. But at the same time, we had the opportunity to build it out of the creek, and we wasted it. What we did is we built it back in a creek. Nobody else in New South Wales or probably in Australia can build anything in a creek bed. What do? We built back in a creek bed. Totally waste of money. There will be a life lost in the future in a summer period when we have a storm, as indicated, a 1 in 2,000 year storm, which I don't believe is correct, as we did only a couple of weeks ago. Somebody will lose their life if the pool is full of kids when a storm hits to the southern side of the pool. We need to make solid decisions that are financially benefiting the full Shire, and we've failed in this pool issue terribly. So what do we do now, councillors? Do we look at doing the right thing by the community's finances? Or do we just keep closing it every couple of years and spend another couple of $100,000 every time the pool liner gets ripped out?
Thank you, Councillor Turlman. Councillor Halstead, and then Councillor Nelson, then Councillor Andrews.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, one probably has to concede that Gary did make a suggestion way back about putting something on stilts, and I don't think too many people took him seriously. Maybe if we were looking at that decision-making process, we'd be doing that now. But quite frankly, there is a solution. I'm not too sure I'm prepared to give it because someone else will suddenly make it their idea. But there is a solution to it, and I'm prepared to talk to the acting general manager, nobody else, about what it is. And I'm certainly not going to make it public here, but there's an engineering solution to everything, and Graham Andrews would know that. There's not a thing you can't solve if you put your head to it. It's a bit like someone like Peter Nelson would solve a management problem. Engineers can solve problems of this type without any doubt, and I know exactly what it is. But I'm just not going to reveal it at the moment, how I do it, but certainly is an embarrassment, to be quite frank. But I'll leave it there at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Nelson, then Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I take it that Councillor Turlin's going to the next election saying we've got to close Mittagong Pool down. I hope not. Look, I asked the question, why did we rebuild the pool? Well, there was a petition containing, now Councillor Turlin said 1,000, I thought it was more. I thought it was 2,000 signatures from our residents calling for the pool to be rebuilt. And that's what we did. We also took into consideration that the northern part of the Shire is growing and that those people were entitled to a swimming pool close to them. The people of Mayoral got one, people of Mossvale got one. And of course, Mayoral Pool needs to be refurbished and it'll be closed for some time, so you'll need the Mittagong Pool. Or do you want to make the hard decision now, councillors, and close Mayoral Pool altogether? Because we're going to have to spend a fair bit of money on the Mayoral Pool. An option was to build the pool above the existing pool. Costing? Never done. So that would have been substantial. So work out your costs that you want to do there. It never came to us because it was so way out in left field. Of course, when the next flood came, maybe that pool above the pool would survive or it wouldn't survive. Who knows? We don't know. There's no answers. And it's not as if previous councils knew of the flooding problem. You know, all those previous councils held fast to keep the Mittagong Pool where it is. 20 years ago, we had a flood that took the pool covers. Replacement cost, $30,000. What was council's property insurance? $30,000. And so we claimed the insurance on this one. The reason I know that is 20 years ago, I was the manager in charge of insurances that claimed the $30,000 on those pool covers. So there's been plenty of councils in 20 years that have kept the pool at Mittagong and for obvious reasons. The community want the pool and it's going to cost the community. And that's the way it is, because there'll be a flood next year and you might lose your pool covers and you can replace them. I'm sure that you know, that claim that someone's going to die there, I'm sure our staff will be more alert that when the rain starts coming, he'll clear the pool out. And in fact, when the temperature decreases, the pool gets closed anyway. So, you know, you can make all those claims of people dying and costs exceeding, but it is what it is. And that's the way it's going to be.
Councillor Andrews, then Councillor Scandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, not necessarily find that Councillor Turlin's statement of possible deaths as obscene, but it's certainly way out of order for over 120 years with floods much greater than we've had or equal to what we've had, and a pool that was over 6 metres deep with trees, rotted trees on the bottom. There have been no reports that I'm aware of any fatalities in that pool. Councillor Nelson spoke about the petition. It was in excess of 2,000 people. We try and close this now, I guarantee you'll have 4,000 people sign a petition within 2 weeks. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like Acting Deputy Manager, Mr. Paul, to make a comment and correct me if I'm wrong. This most recent event, the pool itself, the structure of the pool was 100% unscathed and there was very little damage to the liner. So if it's possible, I'd like him to make comment on that.
Yeah, just to clarify a answer, not to add to the debate. Mr. Paul.
Well, the short answer is that statement is correct.
Exactly.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Scandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, look, we're all concerned about the costs there and the use. I consistently get a lot of feedback from people how they love the actual environment there and recall when it was a rock pool. In fact, the Historical Society put up an article, a series of articles a while back about how it was fabulous. And I think there was a small zoo there, probably many years ago, the early 20s, because people liked it as a picnic place, and it somehow morphed into a 50-metre competition and water polo pool. In 2008, Mr. Mayor, you'll recall that I advocated for the covering of the barrel pool with a retractable fixed solid structure. Council determined to go ahead with Mossvale, which is a 25-metre pool. And at some point, we're going to have to make a decision when the next time comes is whether we invest further into the Mittagong hole, if you wish, water hole, or do we actually go and develop a year-round pool at Barrel, which can accommodate schools all year round, water polo all year round, leisure and health swimming all year round, right next to our outdoor fitness centre and other facilities. In fact, that site is capable of handling a water playground for young people, as well as a spa and other facilities. So Councillor Turland is on the money raising this question now. I don't disagree with the fact that we will need to have this debate. And I think we're going to have to go to the people on this one. We are going to have extensive consultation because obviously different parts of the Shire value their own pools. Do the Bundanoon people have any particular interest in Mittagong as opposed to their own pool, which needs an upgrade and so on? And Councillor Nelson, you know that we in fact budgeted last year to spend serious money on Barrel in terms of pool upgrade, I think also year or two before, in terms of the actual structure and its fit out. So we are investing in it, but I think the opportunity is now that we look at it on a much bigger basis. So I'll be supporting, as I say here, Councillor Turland's question, and we go further from that.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. And before Councillor Turland has his right of reply, I'd like to say a little bit on this. Because Council made a calculated decision. And the comment was made during the debate that we know it will get overtopped again. We know that. We know it and we knew it, and it will happen again. There's no two ways about it. And we said that we will take that on the chin. We will build the pool to a standard that is colloquially known as bomb-proof, but you can't protect the liner. And as Councillor Andrews asked the question, there is minimal damage. Yes, there is damage. Yes, the pool is closed and there was a lot of silt and mud in it and pebbles and whatever. But we knew that. We also know how much that pool is iconic to Mittagong. If it were a twaddly little pool that was of no consequence, we wouldn't have made that decision. But we knew it. And the other thing that hasn't been brought out, and it may not happen, we have got the pool insured. And the pool has now been claimed under the insurance policy that we have on. So, as Councillor Nelson rightly pointed out, when the pool covers went before, they were insured. So sometimes you have to be very aware of the monies that are quoted to the monies that are actually truthful. Now, you may very well be right. Maybe we won't get all our insurance cover back, but the insurance policy covers it. So let's just see. And we don't know, and I don't know the damage to it. It is nothing like the previous one. And Councillor Halstead, I'll be interested to have a confidential conversation with you to try and work out what can extra can be done. But Councillor Andrews is right. You try and close Mittagong Pool, and I'm glad you live in the other, well, I don't know, Mittagong or Mayoral, but I won't be standing on the edge of Mittagong Pool saying I'm prepared to close it. There has been a big investment spent on it to make it to the standard that it is. And as been pointed out, millions of dollars. And to talk about relocating the pool at this point of time, no, let's look at better remediation. I give you the right of reply,
Councillor Whipper wishes to speak.
Councillor Whipper, I normally speak before the right of reply, but this one does capture a bit of emotion. Away you go.
Thank you. Look, everything everybody said is right, but the simple fact is all we are doing is maintaining that pool. It's closed more than it's open. I mean, it's a moot point, isn't it? Because whether we close it or not, nobody's using it lately. So I think we've got to start to consider it seriously. I really do. Because it's one thing to say we can claim under insurance, but that doesn't address the point that nobody's using it. Nobody's been using it for quite a while. So I think, you know, some hard conversations do need to be had, and hopefully some productive conversations along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Let's correct a few statements that have been made. Firstly, nobody's talking about moving the pool out of its current position, but lifting it up to a position where the flood water goes underneath, which was recommended back in 2014 when it first blew up. I think by memory, the staff recommended that we actually don't build the pool where it is, but lift it up out of the ground. There was some discussions that we should rethink about that issue. Not to move the pool, build it out of the creek. That's the problem. The time has proved that it's going to keep failing. Somewhere along the line, the insurance company is going to go, no more. You build a pool in a creek. If you look at the figures on page 182, the $2.9 million was to do the change rooms and the kiosk up, and to do a small amount of work where the kids' pool is, a little bit of work in relation to the large pool. Then we spent $2.8 million rectifying the issue when it blew out the bottom of the pools in both the middle pool and also the large pool. There is only one wall left in the whole pool structure, and that's beside the tank or the drainage culvert on the western side, which is still, I believe, the original wall. The rest of it's been renewed. And nobody's talking about getting rid of it there. I'm just trying, let's make the cost benefit analysis. When does it come to a point where we start to lift it up? If it took another 12 months or 2 years to get a grant to lift it up with precast beams running from the rock wall over the top of the culvert, but still put the pool back where it is and let the water underneath, would that not be a better decision for the wider community? Instead of wasting every couple of years an insurance claim of 200 grand to fix a liner, which is going to be ripped out. It was a bad decision. I believe council staff sort of indicated we shouldn't be doing it back when we went through that process. The Aquatic Centre, 2014, cost $10.6 million. Started off at $9.26 million, I believe, $1 million over budget. Good value for money. We've already spent $6 to $6.5 million on a pool and a creek bed. Would we better now cut our losses and do it properly, spend another 10 million, get it out of the creek, still leave it in the same position? Nobody's asking you to move it. Mittagong people deserve their pool, but we have to make wise decisions. This has not been a wise decision, even though council staff members recommend we rethink it. But we didn't, because we were politically motivated for a 4-year term. So, Mr. Mayor, don't say that I want to close the pool. I'm trying to make financial, solid decisions on public money.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Put the recommendation, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We move on to page 184. Notices of motion, notice of motion for Eco Tourist Facility. It's been moved by councillors Andrews, Turland and Scandrick. Councillor Turland, I will be moving an amendment. So just to move that. And I'll pass the amendment to be put up on the screen.
So it's all of the recommendation. Yeah, that's right.
And if I have a second,
You've got to do the first bit as well. Yeah.
so if I don't have a seconder, then it will lapse for the councillor Andrews. Thank you.
I'm just, can I speak, please?
Yes, you may.
I really need to give, I'm more than happy to second it. I need to give reason why. Just reading this, I can see that, and I firmly believe that this development as an eco tourist resort or whatever should go forward. I've said that from the word go. I think this amendment is, your motion or amendment is reasonable. And I think it's probably the only way that this application has got any hope. So if I may, if it's proper, I'll second.
Thank you.
Your recommendation.
So I'll take my right to speak to it. Then there is councillors Whipper and Halstead. Councillors, I'll just preempt this by saying when we get in the chamber, I'll be vacating the chair to speak to a motion or an amendment. It was one of the recommendations by Mr. Ian Reynolds. But on this, I've listened and I've spoken to the objectors, and the question I pose to the objectors is two things. One is, if this goes to the Land and Environment Court, it has the approval of council staff, and it could be rather difficult to overturn, and that it is better that we keep control of the DA as opposed to the Land and Environment Court. So the question I asked was, if anything you needed to be done to allow this, and they don't support it, they do not support the DA, but what would be the main thing you needed? And if you heard the objector today, it was the road. And I will not support a DA on this road that does not take the locals into consideration. Having lived on a dirt road for 30 years and knowing the dust problems, and for any councillor to support a DA without having this road sealed and then go out and live there, because you get, and there is, 40 caravans wanting to be there and buses and everything else. You get those running up and down the road, and yes, I will wet the road down when we need. Well, I had that problem as well. And the problem is the water tanker uses a lot of water, and you've got to have it, and then you've got to do it regularly, continually, and often. And sealing the road will alleviate this problem for those local residents. And that is the only way I would support it. Otherwise, I'll just vote against it. So, and I believe other councillors will as well. Whether councillors will say, well, let's keep control of this DA, let's put on this stipulation. If there are other councillors who want to take other concerns into consideration, fine as well. But that is my first attempt to support it. And I have every reason not to support this DA after the public abuse I got from the applicant. But it is a planning matter and not a personal matter. So I look at it as a planning matter, and I look at it for the residents who live out there and who will have to put up with this DA for a period of time. So that is my comment. And who had their hand up first? Councillor Whipper, or there's Councillor Whipper, Councillor Halstead. I don't know who else had their card up, but I'll go Councillor Whipper first, then Councillor Halstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm foreshadowing a further amendment, which will lay on the table, obviously, but I can't support either of these recommendations because my opinion hasn't changed, and irrespective of what Mr. Hogan said in his opening comments, the fact is this just doesn't meet the criteria. I'm really surprised at the report that's come forward. I mean, to give provisional approval to something like this is dangerous. At least your recommendation is definitive. It has an outcome, but provisional approval based on goodwill, I think holds us in a really, really difficult position. I see this as really risky business, councillors, if we approve this in any form, because look at it. There was a letter that came through yesterday just highlighting the deficiencies in this report. I mean, not the least of those is that there's no cap on numbers of people that are going to use that facility. In terms of dust, I mean, the report, the traffic report is really scant and questionable, I believe. There's no bushfire plan in place. There's no evacuation plan. This is dangerous stuff, councillors. I mean, we're putting the community at risk by approving this in any form. And to say that it's an ecotourism facility, I think is still questionable. I have enormous doubts about that. And if we approve this on a deferred commencement, this is going to put an enormous impost on our staff in terms of our ordnance officers going out there and checking this all the time. You know, why, if it's a bona fide ecotourism facility, why that approval can't be given up front, that's a mystery to me. I hold that in deep question. There are concerns about the impacts of vegetation outside of the area as well, incremental impacts on the endangered ecological community. The fact that this might have approval as a camping ground doesn't in any way make it an ecotourism facility. It's more of a caravan park than an ecotourism facility. So, councillors, I'd be very, very careful. And I believe sincerely, if this did go to court, it would be thrown out for sure. There's no doubt. This is really inadequate reporting, and to approve it in any form, I think holds us in discredit in the community's eyes. That road is completely dangerous. We know that. As I said, there's no cap on numbers of visitors to that site. They talk about school buses.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper.
All right, I've said it.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, earlier today you did run past me what you've now written in number 2. And I said to you at the time, are you putting that as something the developer's got to do up front, which is a show of some sort of credibility, or were you going to condition it? Now, the way I read it at the moment, because you said to me, no, you wanted to condition it, that's not what number 2 says. So are you suggesting that what you've got there, which has got a lot of merit, that it's going into a condition which is in the deferred commencement? Is that your intent? If so, it needs to be
It's got to be sealed. It's got to be built to Australian standards prior to commencement of operations.
Yeah, that's what I'm still saying. I'm still trying to get you to agree that that's going to be as a condition.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what wasn't written in there. I just want to know that to start with, yeah. That's what you said to me verbally today.
Point taken. It's been reworded to take that into consideration. Councillor Turland, then Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, if you look on page 51 of the last report in December, it shows that the RFS has approved the development. So it's totally compliant. Totally compliant. If you look at page 30 on the previous report in December the 9th, it tells you the maximum of people that can be used, 48 in the cabin and 18 guests in the cabin, and 48 total of cabin and camping. It's clear in the report. This particular road that we're talking about has a 30k speed limit to 50 k's, and probably that's as fast as you can go on a dirt road if you have any common sense. The particular road is one of the roads I'm informed, and I'll correct if I'm right or not later, but it's one of the roads that council put asbestos fill underneath. So what we seem to be doing now is putting the ownership of a contaminated road onto one party to fix something that council has performed, which cost the community $2 million all around the Shire. But we'll put this on this one development for a lousy 48 guests at any one time. That doesn't make logic. Council's even held functions out there ourselves on the site before it was realised it didn't have continuous use rights. This development was bought in good faith, as what it is now, as it was before in 1974, when council gave the approval to build the amenities block, clearly allowing tent camping on the rough plan that was drawn in 1974. So here we are. We now have a situation where the Mayor's condition is it will force this development to fix a road with council staff members to put asbestos under it. It's their duty of care to make sure they keep the road up to scratch so the asbestos doesn't come to the surface.
Excuse me, you've made a statement that there is asbestos under the road. I'll ask staff to clarify. Does any staff member know that that is correct?
Look, from memory, my understanding is, but I guess perhaps I need to be cautious about what I say. I understand that there is a part of the Foxgrove Road where there's potentially asbestos contamination, so it's listed on our contamination register, and we regularly inspect it to make sure that there is no material that is exposed on the road. So from that point of view, is there asbestos there? There could be potentially on part of it, I believe, but I need to double check the actual length. So I think it's a strong statement to say that council staff have put asbestos contaminated material on the road.
Okay, so just to get that clarified, Councillor Turner, you may continue.
Well, I've got a copy of the old records which actually show this road has got and has been capped by council under the EPA guidelines to solve the problem of anything rising to the top.
Suspected.
So sorry?
Suspected asbestos.
You know, I understand that, but it still happened and it still cost the community $2 million to fix around the Shire those roads. Anyway, notwithstanding that fact, here we are, we're going to force one development in one strip, not just in front of his property like a footpath that somebody would do on a commercial property or a road in front of his property. We now want him to do 200 metres to cover up. You're using the excuse of dust. It's in the report.
Okay. Another speaker, Councillor McLaughlin, and then Councillor Nelson.
I think Councillor Halstead was before me, but I'm happy to take it if you like. Yeah. Didn't Councillor Halstead?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Councillor Halstead.
No, I asked a question about your number 2. And I was happy with it that stage.
Oh, okay. All right. Listen, Mr. Mayor, could you add into your amendment some of the concerns that Councillor Whipper has raised about, there's got to be a follow-up to see that this does get accreditation as an eco-tourist. So otherwise, it's just out there in the ether. I think he's made a good point. Just because it's in the bush doesn't mean it's, necessarily an eco-tourist facility. Surely that needs to be part of your amendment, that it be checked and a certain amount of time be allocated. We were told by Mr. Hogan he needs the DA to be approved and then he can get that. Well, I'd like to know that is factually and that's part of the condition.
Okay, point taken. Now, for clarification, Mr. Pepping has indicated he doesn't believe that is possible, but we will check that, and if it can be inserted, then I'm happy to do that, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor, who's the other councillor next? Do you wish to speak, Councillor Halstead? No.
Yeah, look, I do at some stage. Maybe this is the right time now. I'm of the opinion that it's got major problems, and there's a whole lot of concerns I have, and they don't just relate to, for example, the roads. I think it's a prime one, but do I think dust is not to be a problem? Of course not. I could go on, and I don't intend to do that because we debated pretty heavily this last time round, and as it stands at the moment, I'm certainly not in favour of it as an eco-tourism development. There may be others that are, I don't know, but I've hold grave concerns. And, like I said today out on the site, not to do with this, but generally I've got concerns about 2 major issues in terms of constraints to development of any kind. And they are flood and bushfire. Now, we haven't got flood here, but we've certainly got potential for bushfire in that area. And to me, that's prime in my consideration of this particular DA. But like I said, I believe there's deficiencies all over the place, not the least of which is a road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm supporting the residents that are going to be affected by the dust. I know what it's like having dust thrown over the residential home. It's not very nice at all. And look, I don't want to get blood on my hands, but I think approving this development is going to result in a traffic accident that will harm or kill somebody. I'll just take a leaf out of Councillor Turlin's book there. Somebody will be killed on that road with the increased travel from what's generated by the eco-tourism. So I won't be responsible for that. Council is not responsible for fixing the road, particularly for one developer. I just think that's crazy. And I'm more than happy to spend some of the ratepayers' money and take this to the Land Environment Court. I approved that Fairfax position where I didn't take it to the Land Environment Court, but then I hang my hat on the fact that council did spend $600,000 fighting the water bottling plant out at Bundanoon. So, if it was good for that council to spend that sort of money, I think it's good enough for this council to spend some ratepayers' money to take this one to the Land Environment Court. I'm also I want to question the traffic report and the fact that it was done by a staff member. These traffic reports should be done by external consultants, and having it done internally, I just hope that all the appropriate paperwork was done for that employee to undertake that work. So I think I just can't approve this because that road's not going to handle it, and so I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you. before we go on, there was a clarification by Councillor McLaughlin in relation to the accreditation that Councillor Whipper has shown concerns on. So for clarification, not getting in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, clause 5.13 or 5.13 under Wingecarriby LEP 2010 covers the requirements for ecotourist facilities, which is a standard clause from the template LEP. And there's nothing in there that specifically says the council must require a proposal to be accredited through the Ecotourist Australia registration, I think it's called, or Eco Australia certification. My understanding is the applicant is prepared to go down that path. So we could word up a condition that requires them to get that accreditation prior to operation. But I'm not too sure whether or not they give the accreditation prior to the operation or once it begins operation. They're the things that we would have to check out.
Okay, it's starting to get a bit muddy. Council, who wishes to speak?
Can we see Councillor Whipper's motion? Wasn't he going to move a foreshadowed motion?
What is your foreshadowed motion, Councillor Whipper? Have you got one up or?
Well, I haven't got one up, Mr. Mayor, but what I was planning on moving as a foreshadowed amendment was the foreshadowed motion that I put up at the last council meeting of last year, with the addition that no evacuation plan has been submitted.
Can councillors open up their minutes of the previous meeting?
It's on page 9, Mr. Mayor.
And go to page 9. Okay, so your recommendation is now going to be with the magic of the computer be put up as a foreshadowed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with that extra point, concerns that no evacuation plans have been submitted.
And that what? No
bushfire.
No evacuation plans. I mean, if there's a disaster out there, they need to put in a bona fide evacuation plan, Mr. Mayor. They haven't done that at all.
Can I have on page 53 of the previous document on the 9th of December, item 5, evacuation emergency management. It's in the document. Page 53 of the last report of the 9th of December.
Okay, well, Councillor Whipper still has the right to word up a motion as he sees fit.
You can't debate the foreshadowed motion.
But he can't debate it at this stage until the other ones are voted on. So Councillor
clearly is in the document.
Okay.
There is an emergency.
Thank you.
Comment from the staff on that, because I wouldn't want that motion to be defective. A proposed motion, I should say.
True.
You didn't hear me. You can only deal with the motions that are before you, the amendment and the motion. Councillor Whipper's a foreshadowed motion will come forward depending on the outcome of this motion, these two motions. So I will put the amendment as moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Andrews, and I will ask for everybody who has their voting card All in favour of the amendment, please raise your card. Councillors Andrews and who's that? Gare, and those against. Councillors McLaughlin, councillors Nelson, Whipper,
Halstead.
and Halstead. Councillor Halstead. So
Wait there, can we have,
now,
can we get one from councillor Scandrett?
we haven't got one. Councillors abstaining.
Councillor Scandrett.
Councillor Scandrett is abstaining.
That's a negative.
Is councillor Turlin voting or abstaining?
No, so who have we got in the system at the moment? It's hard to follow.
I will put it again. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your card, which is councillor Gare and Andrews. Those and Turlin. Those against. Councillors Whipper, Nelson, Halstead and McLaughlin. And councillor Scandrett is abstaining. I declare the amendment lost. So we now.
No, it's 3-3, isn't it?
No, the amendment was lost.
5-3.
5-3. Because councillor Scandrett abstained in the negative. So all those in favour of the motion, please raise your
Mr.
card.
Mayor,
No, we've got to do this.
Well, you know, he now needs to bring his foreshadow.
Now you can bring, he can bring his foreshadow, sorry, you bring your foreshadow motion forward, which is up on the screen.
You need a second to make it.
Now, have we got a seconder? Councillor McLaughlin. Then is there any speak? We've gone around and around and around. Is there need to?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, if I could, just to clarify that point on the comprehensive emergency evacuation plan. I've been informed reliably that the DA requires a comprehensive emergency evacuation plan, but all that's been provided is an emergency assembly plan. Now, that's certainly not a comprehensive evacuation plan. I know that some of the residents have requested clarification around that because it's not listed on the DA tracker, and there's been no response to that. So as far as I know, there certainly is no comprehensive emergency evacuation plan which is required under the DA. So okay. I'm happy to put that foreshadowed amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Now, yours is now the amendment.
Yep.
My amendment is lost.
Sorry.
We have
point of order.
Excuse me, staff wish a point of clarification.
We had a motion and we had an amendment. We dealt with the amendment. The motion is still on the table to approve. The foreshadowed is to refuse.
That's right.
So it's still a negative until we deal with the motion.
Right. It's been pointed out that there is a direct negative.
Yep.
So yours now is going to be a motion arising, I would imagine.
Foreshadow still.
So I will put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. Councillors Andrews, Scandrett and Turlin, those against. Councillors Halstead, McLaughlin, Nelson.
Oh, stop swearing.
Yeah, that's not very good.
Stop interrupting. Turlin.
I declare the motion lost. And now Councillor Whipper's motion is brought forward.
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor.
Point of order. Could Councillor Whip just clarify, does he want no comprehensive evacuation plan in that last dot point? Or, or is it...
Yeah, as required by the under the DA, yeah.
All right. So as under the development application, right?
Yeah.
Correct? So
Yep.
I'll put the recommendation, which is the motion now moved by councillor Whipper and seconded by councillor McLaughlin. All in favour? Oh, sorry. All in favour, councillors Whipper, McLaughlin, Halstead, Nelson and Gare. Those against? Councillors Andrews, Turland and Scandron. Wow, that goes right around to the people who signed the rescission motion. I declare the motion carried, and the application is defeated. I'll now ask for a recommendation that we go into closed, moved by councillor Andrews and Whipper. And before I do, thank you everyone who has been watching the broadcast. To those who are disappointed with the result in some actions and some who are celebrating in others. And hopefully this is the last Zoom meeting that has to be conducted. So we say farewell to everyone, and we will now